All right. So we've got Aron Ra here. Posted some of his videos this week. So I hope most of you guys had the chance to look at them and get a bit to know him. For those of you guys, Aron Ra is part of the skeptic community. He's an atheist who particularly seems to enjoy debating creationists, and he makes a lot of videos on YouTube critiquing their arguments, and he's done debates with them, including a debate with Kent Hovind. But he also has a political interest. You ran for representative in Texas, is that correct, Aron?
It's Aron, please.
Jesus, I'm sorry. Aron.
It's all right. It's not like I have a tough name like Thunberg or anything. Yeah, I ran for Texas State Senate because in previous election cycles, for the last 3 previous election cycles, the Republicans in my district have run unopposed. So they would have a Republican primary and no Democratic candidate, which was not surprising because they are so far right wing here. They have so many Ku Klux Klan outlets, for example, in my district, that when Democrats have run, they've never gotten more than 5% of the vote.
Jeez. So is there anything you'd like to add an introduction before we get started with questions about yourself?
Yeah, I've been in politics just long enough to know that I don't want to be in politics. Yeah, it is the most shit show experience you could ever have. Honestly, it is so disappointing to see that people never grow out of their middle school bully stage, that their sense of humor and their wit never improves beyond that age. Not when you're in politics.
Okay. All right, so let's just start jumping into questions here. So for anyone in the chat, we've got the chat. Aron. I'm going to mess it up at least. I'm sorry. Aron Ra AMA questions. Post your question there. If it's a good question, a mod will pin it. And if you want to ask it yourself, and you're already a member of this community, unfortunately, just to keep out trolls, have to keep it only to members of the community. If you would like to ask the question, voice yourself, just write VC at the beginning of your question. So the first question we're going to pull up is from Chaim. He wants to know if you think euthanasia should be legal.
Yes.
Okay, would you like to expound on why?
Yeah, the caveat of that, of course, is it has to be up to the person being euthanized. It's their decision, and it should be where you can decide, just like you can decide on a donor card on your driver's license, whether you're going to have your organs used for donations. You should also, and many people do kind of thing, where you will not be resuscitated. Right? Same kind of provision. If you're in a situation where your life is being debilitated and there's nothing you can do about it, this living will situation to allow you not just to be taken off the plug and then allow your body to starve to death and go through whatever discomfort that's going to be, if there is any, depending on the situation. And we want to keep this open for a lot of different possibilities. But the person the person whose life is in question governs or decides whether they're going to continue or not. My wife, for example, wants very much to move out of Texas and moved to a state that allows euthanasia. That's one of her primary goals. Not to kill herself, but to have the option that should she ever be in a debilitative state, because we have relatives who are in a debilitative state. We don't want to live the way they are. The only reason they live that way is that they're stuck in Texas. And so they suffer for years and years and years, for a single generous overdose of an anesthetic could solve theirs and all of their loved ones' problems, financial and emotional. And that's the way it should be. But unfortunately, because Texas is so very religious, one of the problems is that the only types of murder that the Bible doesn't endorse are those that involve mercy. So if there's a good reason, for killing somebody, that doesn't necessarily mean victimizing anyone, or is on the better half, is saving somebody's life. Those types of murder are not endorsed. Those are not allowed. And we're not talking about, obviously, cases of suicide. We're not saying that euthanasia should be illegal, that yet anybody should just go out and kill themselves, although it would be difficult to incriminate somebody who has already killed themselves. Obviously. We are talking about situations when euthanasia becomes an option. So there's going to be legal provisions. You can't just decide, this weekend is going to suck, I don't want to put up with it, I'm just going to die. And we know that there are medical condition situations where you're going to be told, and I have specific examples from my family that are too gut-wrenching to get into right now. To be told that somebody that cannot be saved, they're going to die, and that their last week or two will be unbearable, not just for them, but for everyone who loves them. How do you deal with that? And then you could end that. You could take care of it. Still able to hear me?
Yep.
Okay, for whatever reason, my screen changed and asked me if I wanted to log out. I don't know what the hell that's about.
Oh. Okay. Well, don't.
Yeah, so for example, and this is a very specific situation. A child is dying of leukemia. This is like the worst of all situations, and the hospital sends the child home with the parents. And maybe you'll get the great thing where like some organization will take your kid to Kissimmee and let them enjoy Disney World for all of the 2 days maybe that they'll get out of that before they become in a vegetative state already, because that's how quickly these things usually take. But to then have the mother, to tell the mother that she has to sit and listen to the child's increasingly strained breathing, even to the point where the child will never wake up again. The mother now knows this child has been asleep for 12 hours. It's not going to wake up again. I'm never going to speak to my child again. I now have to listen to the breathing being increasingly strained, heavier and heavier every breath. And I'm going to have to listen to this for days, waiting for the breathing to stop. What kind of sane person, what kind of person claiming to have moral justification of any kind would tell a mother that they have to sit through that? That's insidious. That's all I have to say about that.
Okay. All right, so move on to another question. With these, we're going to be bouncing around quite a bit, but Fawn writes, this is a long question. They're prefacing it with a lot here. In 2016, in an interview, you said, quote, "We're not denigrating anyone when we try to raise awareness of how people are being treated," end quote, when talking about gender and racial equality, yet you're an open critic of religion. Certain religious groups are often the target of hate and crime, even in modern times. Do you believe people in these religious groups should be protected in the same way racial and gender groups are?
I don't want to give privilege to any religion, and I think that's the biggest mistake that the United States made when granting freedom of religion, which I completely support, by the way. I may believe that every religious belief is complete hogwash. It's the most basic of all human rights is the right to think what you think is true. You can't get any more basic in terms of human rights than that. So even if I don't agree with you, even if I think that what you make believe, that you're just pretending to believe in something that you know is not true, regardless what my opinion of it is, you still have the right to believe whatever makes sense to you. Now, persecuting other people for believing other things, I'm completely against, but I'm also against allowing special privileges. Well, the law against marijuana applies to everybody but Rakasta, or what is it, Rastafarians? So you get to smoke marijuana, you get a special privilege that the other ones don't enjoy. This should not be. has to take their hat off for their driver's license picture. Oh, but not you, because you're from the special privilege religion. That shouldn't be the case either. But in any, I'm a strong advocate of criminalizing hate crimes. If we can clearly identify what those hate crimes are. And so if you're attacking somebody simply because they believe differently from you, or it's no different, I think, than having a different genealogical ethnicity. Did I say that right? I don't know. But you understand what I'm saying. I mean, it's no different than, a race or sexual orientation or sexual identity. Why the fuck would I care if you feel more like a female than a male? What the fuck does that bother me? We've had a spate of murders here in the city that I live of trans women. Somebody is out there serial killing trans women because they obviously have some kind of huge issue with how somebody else identifies on their sexual identity. Why the fuck would I care? I'm comfortable with who I am, and whatever your opinion of yourself, that's up to you. I just need to worry about me. Base on all of that.
Okay. So our next question comes from the user Reject Tradition. Go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Ra. I'm glad that you were able to come today. My question's more about the YouTube side. Many of your fellow content creators on YouTube, the so-called skeptic community, have been moving further away from atheist content and moving it towards the more like anti-SJW, anti-PC culture content. Do you support this, or do you kind of see it as like moving in the wrong direction?
I have my primary enemy is, I advocate for truth. I want to improve understanding. Religion doesn't want to do either one of those things. So I have huge problems with religion. Why, as I just mentioned, sexual orientation or sexual identity or equal rights become an issue? How? Why is that an atheist issue? That you need to now. Why are you going off the anti-feminist thing? I don't get it. I'm trying to stay on focus. We're surrounded and outnumbered by a heavily financed faction that is in charge of every level of our state and federal government. They're in charge of literally everything, and they want us to be distracted however we can be, so that we don't have our eyes on the prize, so that we will ultimately lose because we are divided. And now we have a whole faction that has just completely, literally lost the plot about what the fuck we were supposed to be talking about or what their goal was, so that they can complain that somebody else complained about a video game, and so that becomes their primary issue. Well, then stop calling yourself an atheist activist then, because you're not talking about atheism. You're talking about something else now. So you go do the thing you want to go talk about, and I'm going to stay focused on mine.
All right. Thank you. That was very good.
All right. So our next question comes from Breezy. Breezy asks, did you at one point in your life believe in an omnipresent creator?
I did when I was a child, and I thought that the people around me, that the grown-ups around me had some idea what they were talking about. Everybody I knew told me that God was a conclusively proven scientific fact. I was very disappointed to begin the growing up process, and somewhere around puberty realized that nobody in my family had any idea at all, and they were just lying to me.
Okay. So real quick for everyone in the chat, if you want to invite any of your friends to the AMA so they can listen in live, it's just discord.gg/bluepolitics. So
an important point on that.
What's that?
An important point on that last question. There were a lot of things that when I grew up in the 70s in Los Angeles, which was like the cultural center for all kinds of pseudoscientific woo. And I was at one time fed all this kind of stuff. I believed every ridiculous thing required to be a Ghostbuster. I bought every type of woo there was when I was a kid, and it was a long time to grow out of it. But the thing was, is that I wanted the things that I believe to be true, and if they were not true, then I wanted to stop believing them. And so the goal became that I didn't want to be fooled into believing something that was not evidently true. And now, if you've got enough evidence that you can't debate it, at least you've got a good reason for holding the position. At least you're defensible. If you end up being wrong, but you have all these facts pointing that way, at least you can use that to your defense. But when you don't, when all you've got is faith, or my preacher said so, well, then you don't have any of that. So and it certainly doesn't help you if what you believe is ultimately not true. So you need to do what you can to find out whether it is true or not, or how true it is, which is important because very few things in reality are in this dichotomy of black and white, good or evil, true or false, left or right, or what have you. Most things are on a bell curve where we lie somewhere around the middle, close to each other some ways. So I started looking for the truth of all these different things that I wanted to believe. And on a whole lot of them, I couldn't find anything. Whenever I could find evidence, it contradicted other evidence. So multiple claims for the same thing, like astral projection for one. I was very much into that when I was a teenager. And when I would find people who claimed to be able to do it and all of this, and I'm asking their background on it or their descriptions of it, all of their information contradicts. And there's no way to back up any of it. There's no way to confirm. If you get two conflicting stories, there's no way to show which one's right. And if you can't show that there's any truth to it, then it's safe to say there's no truth to it. So that's it. The truth is what the facts are, what you can show to be true. And if you can't show that there is any truth to it, if you can't show the truth of it, then there's no truth to it. We're done. No truth to it, meaning there's nothing about it we can show to be true. And pretty quickly I discovered that applies to absolutely every religion ever devised by man.
So this relates to another question we have. Do you think it applies to every religion equally?
Yeah, they're all made up. All religions, as I understand it. I took a couple classes in college on the comparative religions, the history of world religions, and so forth. And one of those classes asked me to define what a religion is, and they said this is a great challenge. People can't define what religion is. I do classification. My primary interest is in phylogenetics, so I can classify things. So I determined that every religion that is universally accepted as such by both its adherents and its critics is a faith-based belief system that posits the idea that a supernatural essence of self somehow survives the death of the physical body to continue on in some other form, whether it's reincarnation or whether it's, an eternal soul or what have you. Every religion holds to this, and while people have tried to say that the Pharisees or the Sadducees were some exception to that, according to Jewish scholars, they were not. The Council of Jewish Americans, or I can't remember what the organization was. No, they're saying that the Sadducee belief and the Pharisee belief, they still held to the idea that there was a soul that survived death. Every religion holds to this notion. And so this bothers me when they say that atheism is a religion too, since we don't hold to that. And of course, when they say that evolution is evolutionism, well, then they're just trying to project their own faults onto other people. It's a version of the tu quo qui fallacy, which I refer to as the pot calling the silverware black.
Did you say the pot calling the silverware black?
Yes.
Okay, that's... I get it, I think. So, next question, Roriton asks, which religion do you consider the most moral or the least odious?
Well, all of them, every single one that qualifies as a religion does have some reprehensible crap to it and an awful lot of hypocrisy. A lot of people tend to point to Buddhists as being the most moral among them. And I know of a number of examples of extreme hypocrisy and criminality and militant criminality even among Buddhists. But at least Siddhartha Gautama, the original Buddha, he himself was an agnostic. He said that it doesn't matter if God exists or if gods exist, because he was supposed to be a branch off of Hinduism. As a matter of fact, the Hindus tried to reclaim him as a fourth incarnation of Vishnu, trying to reappropriate Buddha because his religion became so huge. And I got into it. I was married at a Theravada Buddhist temple, and I got into an argument with the Buddhists there because we had an American convert who was telling me he's the Buddhist teacher for that temple, and he told me that Buddhism was not a religion because they don't meet any of the criteria for a religion that I just described in my definition. One of those things being that they don't believe in a God. And I said, well, I'm asking a handful of questions beyond that. He says that after you die, he said there's no such thing as a self, right? And we can't be reborn because we were never born the first time. And my argument to that was, well, we all have birth certificates, so how's that work? And so I'm not asking to be born again, but what I have is a certificate in my wallet that tells me I was born the first time. What is your argument against this? And he said that when you die, rather than being reincarnated in the traditional sense, that you may continue on as a ghost for a while before you find some new corporeal manifestation. I said, okay, so you said you don't believe in the self, but you're talking about you. And you said you don't believe in afterlife, but you may continue as a ghost. So you do fit the definition that I just gave of a religion that posits that a supernatural essence of self will continue on in some form. And then you just said that you can pray to Buddha and that Buddha will answer you in the form of miracles. That makes him a god since he is immortal and has magic powers. Therefore, Buddhism is a religion. And I've never been welcomed back to the Buddhist temple.
Huh. So I'm not very well familiar with it, but from a little bit I know, it sounds like with your definition, you wouldn't say Confucianism is really a religion. Is that correct?
I would not. Although I do have to confess that when you combine Confucianism and Taoism into the same unit, along with the Chinese traditional ancestor worship, when you put these three together in a pot, it is one of the biggest religions in the world. But it's not recognized as such. It doesn't meet the criteria except when you include the ancestor worship.
Okay.
And you know what that religion is? You know, there's another word that was popularized that put the Chinese ancestor worship, Confucianism, and Taoism all together into one blanket, and it was called Jedi and Sith.
Could you explain that?
Yeah, George Lucas based the Jedi religion on that combination. Taoism, and he never mentioned Chinese ancestor worship. He just mentioned Confucianism and Taoism. And primarily Confucianism, although if you've ever read the Tao Te Ching, it really does align with what he's talking about. And there's a line that I love out of the Tao Te Ching. If I hadn't, I saw Star Wars when I was 14 years old, and I thought that this was the first religious claim that I've ever heard that made sense. When Obi-Wan Kenobi said that the Force is an energy field created by all living things that surrounds us, penetrates us, and binds the galaxy together. Because I believed in all the pseudoscience woo that was being taught in California at that time, I thought that this was a reasonable argument. I identified as Jedi for many years. Honestly, that was my sincere religion. Had I read the Tao Te Ching before watching Star Wars, I would have identified as a Taoist. The Tao Te Ching has one line that says the Tao, or nature rather, nature acts without intent, and so cannot be said to be benevolent nor malevolent to anything. And I just thought that was beautiful. Although some people would think it would hurt. Well, I'm sure that in some people's philosophy, they would find that horrific.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've never heard that bit before. So our next question comes from David. He asks, what do you think is the strongest argument for the existence of God? I can't think of one that qualifies as strong. How about what is the least bad?
That works better. Yeah, I can do that one. Well, like look at the sunset. The Monty Python wrote this wonderful song about the creatures of the earth. God, all the horrid things, all the each beastly wasp and his poison that stings, and God made the brutish venom. He made their horrid wings. Yeah. So if you want to look at the sunset and think that that's nice, well, there's some parasites that I've pulled off of dead rabbits that would also disprove God by the same logic.
Okay. So Waffle Boy asks, what is your favorite band?
It's difficult to say because Black Sabbath is broken up and Motorhead is dead. And I'm going to go with In This Moment for this moment. Unless
Okay.
Judas Priest is still touring.
So if you had to include, if you could include, any band at any given time, because I know ones like Van Halen split and changed membership a million times, and you can include the dead ones. Which is your favorite of all time?
Of all time, it's Black Sabbath.
Okay.
I've had all their albums from when Ozzy was with them, and their although Heaven and Hell, the whole album was not good. The song Heaven and Hell, the one song by itself, the title track, was awesome. And Ronnie James Dio's run with them in for Mob Rules was honestly one of their best albums.
So the same user, Waffle Boy Coney, asks, what was your experience with the Texas school board like?
The funny thing about the board is that they know that what they're saying is not true, that they've made this abundantly clear, but they're going to teach it anyway. And some of people on the board have admitted exactly that to me. Mark Ramsey was a guy that was courting the Board of Education. He was trying to get intelligent design taught, and he admitted to me in a written formal debate that he knew that transitional species did actually exist and it could be confirmed in the fossil record, but he wanted to teach students that there were none, and the reason he gave was he said that it was important that they believe there are none. So he admitted to me in writing before moderators that he thought it was okay to lie to students in order to manipulate their belief. And that was just an overt admission of what a lot of other people very clearly believe. It's not about the truth. They don't care what the truth is. They care about manipulating people's beliefs because then that causes them to vote the way you're supposed to.
Oh. I hadn't heard about this case, but that actually pulls pretty neatly into a question that Alien Robot Ghost asks. He asks, I guess there's two parts to this. How do scientists determine that two different species of prehistoric fossils share a common ancestor, and does that process conform to the scientific method?
There are multiple processes depending on how far it is. There are a number of different specs, but depending on whether we're talking about an animal or a plant or what have you, there are different types of criteria to identify what a species is, because with sexually reproductive animals, you're going to have one set of criteria, but for non-sexual reproducers, you're going to have others. And then plants also have sex, but it's a different way. So again, the classification for species is different. So anything that belongs to the same clade as another group is obviously going to have a common ancestor with it. And when you go back through the fossil record and when you go back through its genetic orthologue, you will find that former construct. And some species have been identified solely by genetics, for which we have no physical remains at all, but we have a genetic signature for them. For example, a fourth species of human was discovered in the genes of Melanesians. Just as they found that up to 4% of anybody but sub-Saharan Africans will have Neanderthal in their DNA, there's another group of Melanesians that have a different signature from a different human group for which we don't have any physical remains.
I've never heard that before.
There's also Denisovans, and I think we have genetics for Denisovans. There may be more than just this. I know that initially we only had a single finger bone, one finger bone, and that's it, to represent an entire species of humanity. Yeah, they had to have had genetics, or how else would they have known that it was a separate species? But so we have we've confirmed Neanderthals, Homo neanderthalensis, or Homo sapiens neanderthalensis, if you prefer, and Denisovans, and I forget what the other group is called, but there's 4 now.
Okay. So our next question comes from the user We Got Bugs Fellas. They ask, do you believe there's truly a separation between church and state? And if not, would you find that dangerous?
I'm saddened that the founding fathers seemed to be so astute on so many of the things they predicted. It's like they saw Trump coming 200 years ago and warned us exactly what they were going to say, or what we were going to see. I mean, to a T. Didn't make that wall as strong as they needed to be. I mean, Jefferson wrote in a number of private letters that we needed to make this impenetrable wall between church and state, but he didn't put very strong language. I don't think he even put the word wall in. He put in separation of church and state, but he never explained why, and they never went into detail. And that's a problem, because they were trying to have a brevity with words, which in the course of centuries has worked against them. Look at the Second Amendment, for example. It mentions that the state having a well-formed militia, the right of the citizens to keep and bear arms, shall not be abridged. Everybody misreads that. And they think that it means that the citizens are supposed to have guns to protect themselves from the state. At the time, we were the militia. The only way to have a well-organized militia is if everybody had their own guns, so that when you call on them and say, hey, the British are coming, we need you on the beach at 4 a.m. with your gun, then that's the way that works. That's how your militia works. So we were all supposed to be pressed into the service of the military before we had a military. Everybody reads that wrong. So the founding fathers' brevity of words has really, really hurt us. So they needed to be more clear. Like Jefferson was in his private letters, he needed to express that in the Declaration. That's exactly what that separation of church and state means.
Okay. So I'm actually going to come up with a question here, because what you were just talking about raised one for me. So I've always read that so this is the Second Amendment, as 2 different parts there. The first being a preamble. It's the part about, militia being necessary to the security of a free state. And then the second clause being the actual statement of a right, which it reads, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Right. So you believe that the first bit is actually a modifying clause on the second clause? Does that make sense to you, my question?
It gives the reason why. Why do we have a right to bear arms? Because this country needs a militia.
Right, but the second clause still says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Right. So do you believe that the right to bear arms has to be in direct connection to a militia for it to be exercised?
It's clarified in the statement. Because the state the state having a well-organized militia, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Yes. It's because the state needs a well-organized militia. That's why the people need to have guns. And so the arguments that, well, back then they only had muskets and they didn't think, no, you're thinking about it the wrong way. The way it was intended was that we're supposed to have AK-47s. We're all supposed to have AR-15s. We're all supposed to have assault rifles. We're supposed to be the military. But then we've now become the country with the most grossly over-bloated military ever in history. So maybe revisions are in order.
So just seeking clarification here, are you suggesting we should make revisions so that we don't have an overbloated military and we have more people?
That would be my preference, honestly.
Okay. So I'm actually a little bit unclear here. Do you think that people as individuals should be able to have guns, or do you think that should change?
I was raised as an American citizen, and when I go to, and I love London. I absolutely do. I've been to London many times, twice a year for the last few years. It's my favorite city in the world. But it always bothers me that even though I don't have a gun, I don't have a gun in the house myself. Armed for bear, he's ready for alcohol, tobacco, and firearms to try to take him down. But I don't. But it still bothers me when if I were to go to England, that I can't decide, I want to buy this particular gun because I think it's neat for whatever reason. I can't buy it because I'm in England, and English people are not allowed to buy guns. As an American, if I want a Calico M950 with a 99 round helical clip of 9mm rounds, yeah, I'm an American. I can buy that. One of the coolest things I think I ever saw as an American citizen when I was a kid, I was 16. We were in Las Vegas, Nevada, and there was this car lot that sold all these hyper cars, the super sports cars. And in that same lot, they sold a half-track tank treads on the back dually wheels and then regular truck tires on the front. And it had a twin-mounted recoilless rifle right in the window. I thought that was cool as hell.
That's pretty fucking
dope. Why would you need 20mm machine guns on a half track? But you know what? You're an American. You can buy that. Now, my opinion on guns is not going to be the same as a lot of other atheist activists. I also have to recognize that the vast majority of mass shootings that we've had in this country have been from right-wing Christian nationalists as being one of the biggest terrorist threats that we have. And so when Americans who tend to be right-wing Christian nationalists talk about how other countries have more guns than we do, whether it's Switzerland or Israel or whatever, they're not in that same mindset. So, why does Switzerland not have the mass shootings that we have? Because they don't have the stupidity that we do. That would be part of my thinking about that. Mind you, I'm not a gun nut. I don't have a gun. I don't particularly even want one. The only time I ever wanted a gun was when I used to live in Arizona and everybody had guns. Absolutely everybody had guns. Just forever, you've had the right to carry a firearm on your hip as long as everybody could see it. They didn't have concealed weapons, but you can carry anything you want. A battle axe over your shoulder, doesn't matter. You can carry a sidearm into a convenience store that sells alcohol, doesn't matter. And then I moved to Texas, which at that time didn't yet have legal guns. Now everybody's got a gun in Texas, but when I moved to Texas, nobody did. Except the bad guys. And so I remember seeing a couple of really bad carjackings, or somebody who just walks up and shoots somebody to take their car and drives away. In front of 100 witnesses, nobody can do anything about it. So we don't have any instances like that anymore. And And so now I no longer feel the need that I have to have one. I mean, everybody's got a gun now, so what the hell? Why?
Okay. So let's see. The next question here comes from Wavy. Wavy asks, which Democratic candidate do you support?
That's going to be so obvious. Do I need to answer? I think that this country needs to take a hard left turn, but I don't think that the issue is right versus left. I think we've been fooled. The big issue that people are, the media has been telling you that it's a right or left issue, and it's not. If you look at the political compass, it's authoritarian versus anti-authoritarian. Communism, for example, was authoritarian, whereas people like Bernie are anti-authoritarian, meaning more, there's another term for that, libertarian, but libertarian is a party that is specifically on the right. We're talking about left-wing libertarian, which means anti-authoritarian. democratic socialists, social democrats, and so forth. I advocate for an anti-authoritarian position, which is actually the libertarian position of less government. And even though I'm on the left, I'm demonized for wanting more government. I actually want less government than the Republicans are trying to enforce. The current GOP wants way more government than I do. I want a minimal number of responsibilities for the government to take care of. Education being one of them. And another reason that they're against having state-funded education is because they don't want people to have an education, period. They want this country to be dumb. I don't. This country was once the most innovative, the most inventive, the most pioneer nation on the planet. We were really smart people who once led the academic world and the scientific world. We were in charge of it all, and we gave it up. And I don't think we're ever going to get back. We are going to lose our standing as a first world nation, as the leading first world nation. We're going to lose it altogether, entirely, because we've abandoned science.
Okay. So that ties interestingly into another question. I would think that what you just said would tell us the answers to this, but I've learned recently that it doesn't necessarily. So the question comes from asks, do you think communism is the answer, and do you think there is some way to make it work?
Again, communism is authoritarian. As you guessed, my answer would be no, it's authoritarian, so no. I believe in having private property, and communism does not allow private property. Socialism does, and socialism is a balance with capitalism. I don't have to be full on. I don't have to be non-democrat or a non-capitalist to be socialist. I'm not saying I'm socialist either. I believe that we do have good advantages from some applications of capitalism, and we are hurting ourselves by not adopting more socialist systems and networks. At the same time, socialism should be clasped to capitalism to maintain a balance, because while everybody tells you about how horrible runaway socialism is, we are living in runaway capitalism, and it is literally destroying the world and everything we hold dear.
Okay, so our next question here comes from Law's Abstraction. They ask, have you ever heard of the Aristotelian proof? If so, what do you think?
No, I don't think I have. That doesn't sound, Aristotelian other things perhaps, but not Aristotelian proof.
Okay, so the only thing they wrote is i.e. Thomas Aquinas. I don't know if that helps.
Aquinas.
Say again?
I hate Aquinas. Arguments with philosophers, they always want to pigeonhole me into a position that I never held. It doesn't matter that I don't accept verificationism, they still want to say that I'm a logical positivist. I just don't want to be fooled into believing things that are not evidently true. So I want to verify that there is some truth to it before I allow myself to accept that idea. That doesn't mean that I accept verificationism. That doesn't mean that I'm a logical positivist. But people will still say, well, logical positivism fell out of favor in the 19th century. And so, okay, well, that's fine. This thing I never held to fell out of favor in the 19th century. And to justify that, you're going to dig up some asshole from the 13th century? Really? And the guy that I would cite from the 19th century, David Hume, he doesn't refute your Aquinas. Why not? Philosophers, because it seems that the only way to win an argument with a philosopher is to have more credentials than your opponent does. That's it. That's all.
Okay, so speaking of philosophers, our user Philosophical Zombie asks.
Can I just say that I love that name?
So, yeah, they ask, what is the moral significance of consciousness and personhood separately?
Well, I don't think the question, the way it's framed, is very individualistic, but there is no morality individually. Morality is a social construct, and it is determined by our evolution as a social animal. Society needs morality, not people, not individual people. I mean, individual people will do just fine being completely selfish and only being concerned with your own ends. But when you're in a society, now you have other people that you have to figure out, and you don't want to piss off all of your peers by being unfair to everybody else, because you know, of course, that the political karma will come back and people will be unfair to you, or that they will visit this vengeance back upon you. And through the course of population genetics, we will, of course, weed out. We're going to get deviations all the time. We're going to have people with underdeveloped frontal lobes and no mirror neurons or whatever. But as those people crop up, those people who are selfish and discompassionate to their fellow human, they're going to be ostracized from society by being imprisoned, by being banished, or by being killed. But what you will end up generating very, very quickly is that people will have an innate sense of compassion for their family, friends, and fellows. And to a large degree, this carries on beyond other species too, so that our consciousness and our compassion should have said instead of consciousness, our compassion for other living things extends beyond have to live with, so that we are able to feel empathy and sympathy and support for other things that wouldn't have had any effect on us, neither as a threat nor as a help to us. So we can reach out to people who would never know us and be completely altruistic in our beneficent efforts. And this is what I think is the benefit of humanity. And I've seen it in other animals too. It's just they don't have the capacity for cognition that we do. I mean, I love that movie there was a video from Kruger Wildlife Park. There's this one wildebeest, I think, water buffalo calf that ends up getting snagged by a crocodile, and the thing manages to try to pull himself from the beach, and then he's surrounded by lions, and then there's a tug of war where the lions pull him away from the crocodile. Well, great, you've been saved from the crocodile, and now you're about to be eaten by lions. And so this poor calf is having like the worst day imaginable until all of the other water buffaloes show up and surround this half a dozen lions. When you have 60 water buffalo, and they're getting angry. And it was a beautiful thing to watch these lions run away in terror as the water buffaloes finally realized, you know what? One-on-one, we can't beat these 6. But all of us will whoop their ass. That's the way society works. We pull together. And we only work together. Any one of us on our own by ourselves, doomed.
Okay, so a little change of pace here. So we've got a question from Fawn. Is religion acceptable if practiced secularly and in private?
How do you practice religion secularly? Secularism means that legislation is regardless of religion. That you don't. Here's the logic. If you use religion as your sole reason for any action or position, then you still haven't given a reason. You have to give a reason why your religion adopts that. The fact that your religion adopts that isn't an answer. I don't care that your religion requires you to do this. Give me something better than that. And how you can practice religion secularly, I mean, unless you're not passing any legislation according to it. Fine. You want to go make believe something on your own? Fine. If you legitimately believe that this is the way things are, fine. You go have at it. I don't care. As long as it isn't imposed on me. As long as we don't have teachers that are running a classroom to where they bring all of my kids and all these other kids of different faiths and force them into prayers, then I don't have a problem with that. This is a problem that a lot of people in America, they don't understand, because we are a Christian majority in this country. They don't get it. They don't realize that when you send your Christian kids to a classroom, the teacher's almost certainly going to be Christian, and the state, of course, the Christian teachers in Christian predominant states are going to lead children in Christian prayers. And in the dominant position, you're not even going to be concerned about the Jewish kids or the Muslim kids or the atheist kids or the Native American kids or the Buddhist kids who don't want to be forced into praying to somebody else's God, because that's a violation of natural human rights. One of the most basic of all human rights, as I mentioned before. And so when Madeleine Murray O'Hair got prayer out of school, what she actually did was stop teachers from forcing children to pray to their religion as opposed to their parents' religion or their family religion. And so every Christian ought to have been with Madalyn Murray O'Hara on that, because that's the most natural human right. But they weren't. They misrepresented it completely and said that she made it illegal for children to pray in school, which is a complete lie. But then that's what religion is based on, nothing but lies.
Okay. So this next one starts with a quote. I just want to make sure you agree with this quote before we get onto it. They say that you said morality is a social construct. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay, so it's a little bit spicy, but the question is, did Epstein's Island socially construct a valid morality for their own?
You have to understand what morality is. And morality, I love the way that what was it, Scott Clifton, the soap opera star, has a YouTube channel called Theoretical Bullshit. He did a fantastic video called A Treatise on Morality, and I've watched it many times, and I think it's the most beautiful representation of what morality is that I've ever seen. And he says that a particular action or choice is moral or right if it promotes happiness, well-being, or health, or if it diminishes harm and suffering. And a particular action or choice is immoral or wrong if it causes harm or unnecessary harm or suffering, or if it diminishes happiness, well-being, or health. It's very simple. This is an objective standard. We all agree to this. I take this edict, if you will, to religious believers to identify what is and what isn't moral. And seemingly everybody agrees with this. We can all identify this is a definition of what morality is. Unfortunately, it takes a lot of religious convictions and shows them to be immoral. A lot of the commandments or a lot of the commands, not the commandments, but even the commandments really, that God gives are shown to be immoral. And a lot of things that people call immoral are not. And a lot of these questions can be answered simply with, does it cause unnecessary harm or suffering? That determines it. So here you have a number of people that are being used as chattel, not necessarily against their will, but what will do they have when they're underage? So it qualifies as against their will, even if in the moment they're into it. If they're not of legal age to give consent, then we can't say that they're into it, even if they were. I hope that makes sense, because you can be in the moment as an underage minor and then realize later. And I think a lot of us do this, where we grow a little older and then we're deeply embarrassed at the things that we used to do and we used to like, that we used to believe. I'm certainly that way. I mean, I am so embarrassed at the things that I used to believe and the things that I used to say, the positions that I used to hold when I was a kid, when I was a young man. As I told you, I believed all kinds of horse shit. And I talked out of my ass about, the truth and having the truth until I figured out what the word truth meant. And now I'm very embarrassed at who I was as a young man. So we have people that are being victimized. That makes it immoral. Complicated than that.
Okay. So our next question, this harkens back to one from earlier. What do you think is the strongest argument for atheism?
Atheism is not a position. A number of people say that I want to declare the truth of atheism. There's not a truth to declare for atheism. Atheism is a reaction to the statement made by theists that there is a God. And positive claims require positive evidence. If you say there is a flying spaghetti monster, you say there's an invisible pink unicorn, you say there's a celestial teapot. If you say there's a dragon in your garage, any of a number of different examples, a monster under your bed, if you like, prove it. Why do you say that? If you tell me that I'm going to win the lottery tomorrow, and I happen to win the lottery tomorrow, but there was no way that you could have known that, you'd still be wrong. You can't have a prophecy if you don't have a way of knowing it. And if by coincidence you can be correct on some predictions, but that doesn't give you any credence in this. I hope that makes it. I hope that makes some sense, but I don't think that it is. I think I sidetracked myself in the mid. Remind me again. Where's our question?
Yeah. That question was. Shoot,
the best argument for atheism. That's what it was.
Yes.
So Hitchens' razor is that what is asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. So the appropriate response to an unsupported assertion of impossible absurdity is this impossible thing exists, and I assert that for no reason. I got no evidence at all. I have a book full of fables, and I have a stack of other books of other fables. I'm going to automatically dismiss them out of hand. I'm going to say that this is the only book of fables out of all of this stack that is absolutely true. Why do I say it's absolutely true? Because I want to believe it's absolutely true. It's an empty claim. The claim, the book, is not evidence of itself. Fully appropriately say, no, there isn't. Whatever this thing is that you're saying it is. We should never be absolutely convinced of anything that is not evidently true. That's what faith is being convinced of things that are not evidently true. Atheism is not trying to be convinced of anything. It's just a simple rejection of an unsupported assertion. So the best argument in favor of atheism is simply that there is no truth to any religion, meaning that there's not one thing that any religion can show to show that they have any actual validity, that there is a there to show that they are any more accurate about the supernatural than anybody else, or that there even is a supernatural at all. There's nothing to distinguish a religious belief from the illusions of delusion. There's no way to show that it isn't something somebody just made up. God, every type of God, every form of spiritual connection anybody has, past life, remembrance, extraterrestrial, aliens, all of it. Communicating telepathically, I mean, your past life remembrance, your ghosts of your dead relatives coming to visit you and give you spiritual inspiration, all of that is just imaginary friends.
Okay. I think Hitchens Razor is actually a pretty good answer there. I would agree with that. So, next question we have here. Oh, shoot. I didn't even reform this. So, religion has formed in many different cultures across the world. I think nearly in every single culture, actually. Do you think that religion has had positive advantages at certain times in human development?
It's been an enormous detriment across the board. There have been a couple of pocket isolated groups that don't, they're like little primitive tribal people that never had a God, don't understand the concept of God. There's no validity to the God concept for them, but they're very rare, as you said. It's almost ubiquitous, and the primary reason for that is that people didn't understand that air was particulate matter. So they understood that you will die if you can't breathe, but they don't understand why we breathe. So clouds move and disappear out of nothing and reappear out of nothing. Smoke has a similar sort of a movement. Evaporation coming out of bottles has led to the idea of genies. Another one, the Afriti, which is the smoke coming off of the fire, especially when it goes into a vortex pattern. I don't know if you've ever seen a fire turn into a vortex. That it can happen. That's where the idea of an Afrit comes from, which is an advanced type of fire genie. Genies were literally dust devils traipsing across the desert. They appear out of nothing. They spin, they throw your tents around and throw your stuff around, and then they disappear because they're being malevolent devils. People have no idea that this is just the movement of air because of changes in temperature in one place as opposed to another. They don't get that. They don't understand why we need to consume oxygen. Oxygen itself wasn't discovered until like 1731 or something in that neighborhood, I think. Was disproving the theory of phlogiston was what produced the theory of oxygen. So people made all kinds of explanations about what this is. So they came up with this spirit that leaves your body when you die, that keeps you alive, while you're alive. And then when you sneeze, your soul has left your body, and this may leave you to be possessed by some other spirit form. And so that's why when you sneeze, people say, bless you, because they don't know what air is. And so later we come up with these other religious beliefs, and it becomes so convoluted they don't really realize that they're talking about air anymore. Now spirit has a different incarnation in people's minds. There's a different visage there. They don't realize that they're just talking about air. But even in the Bible, it says, Ecclesiastes 3:18-21, it talks about how nobody really knows. And I love that this is something in the Bible that says this, that nobody really knows whether the breath/spirit, depending on the translation, of the beast goes into the earth and the breath/spirit of the man ascends into heaven. Nobody knows. So just go about your day, because who's ever going to show you? This is essentially paraphrased what it means. And in that same passage, it also says that men are beasts, and it is only our vanity that prevents us from realizing that. So it's my favorite passage of the Bible, actually, and the only piece of wisdom that I can verify exists within that book.
So, do you believe that the principles behind evolution, namely the survival of the fittest, applies to ideas?
Survival of the fittest is not actually a Darwinian principle. That was the survival of the fittest phrasing was that came from an economist named Herbert Spencer. And because Spencer phrased it that way, and he was a published author in economics and in politics, and said some rather egregious things on some other topics, it caused Darwinian theory to have some very bad press by association with this other thing this other guy said that Darwin didn't even say. So that's unfortunate. Now, what was the question? Now that we've gotten off that, give me the question again.
Do you believe that Darwinian principles apply to ideas? That is, how ideas form.
Well, we can use natural selection and a couple of other selective principles that actually do apply to ideas, and one of them being religion. And there are a number of things that we do that, like memology, for example, which is the thing that Dawkins was famous for, coming up with the idea of memes, which nobody understands anymore because now we have internet speak, and so we have a completely different idea of what a meme is. But it's this idea that is self-perpetuating. Religion has a means of keeping itself to where it looks like it was designed. It looks like religion designed itself. It looked like the religion came up with this plan or this strategy to keep itself going. In actuality, it had no intent of its own. It was entirely incidental. How it comes up with this idea of faith to preserve its belief, and the different types of defenses to come up for anybody that doesn't believe in it. When you study this, it looks like religion designed this great strategy that was never actually intended at all. It just looks like it was intended. It looks like it was devised.
So why do you think that religions have grown, and I guess you could say by membership or whatever, prospered throughout the centuries?
Well, for a long time, I continued to celebrate Christmas. I recently stopped. I continued to celebrate Christmas because it was a cultural tradition. So for whatever inexplicably stupid reason, I was given the idea that I should take a tree into my house and put tinsel on it. And I don't even remember what the hell I'm putting tinsel on for. I don't understand that the tinsel is supposed to represent snow that used to fall on the tree because they used to do the shit outside. And I didn't realize that what the ornaments are for is because the Druids used to make living sacrifice of the tree, so they would put like gold and treasure on the tree as sacrifice and then burn the tree, melting all the gold with it, and thus sacrificing their treasure. Things of that sort. Why do we put the treasure onto the tree? I'm not even aware of what these traditions are. I've just raised that I'm supposed to follow this practice. I'm supposed to keep this holiday. The more I study it, the more vacuous it ends up being until I eventually gave it up. But people hold to this religion for the same reason that they hold to any other form of cultural identity. I have a certain affinity for being raised as a child in California and being a young man in Arizona. They're being raised in these different places has an imprint on who I am. Has significantly changed who I was. If you were to go back and take me, at 6 years old and plot me into any other place into New York or Miami or London or whatever, and let me be raised there, I would be an entirely different person. It has nothing to do with our soul. It has to do with our genetics to a degree, of course, But what culture has a huge effect on who we are, and religion has integrated with culture so that many people can't distinguish them. I've run into a number of people, like there was a Hindu couple in one of my classes, and I was excited to meet a pair of Hindus in Texas, of all places. And I said, you're Hindu, you can help me with this. There's this passage in the Mahabharata where Krishna gives sight to the blind, just like Jesus did. But I don't know where it is in the Mahabharata. It's too big for me to try to find this. I don't even know how to search for it. Where is this passage? Since you're Hindu, you should know. And they look at me as if I'm stupid, and they said, we're Hindu because our parents are Hindu, not because we believe it. And that was when I was introduced to the idea that you can be culturally a religion that you have no belief in at all. And of course, Jews in New York, there's plenty of them that I've met that are completely, they know how to be a cultural Jew. They don't believe in a God at all, but they still have this deep passion for Passover. Why? It's complete bullshit. But if you were raised with it, then it becomes part of who you are. And they can't separate themselves, that aspect of what has become their identity. I hope my answers are satisfactory. I don't know. I might be going off the rails here.
No, that's fine. So if I understand what you're saying here, right, I'm just going to try to recharacterize it, and if I'm butchering it, please yell at me. But religion has been able to succeed and, stick around because of the cultural practices associated with it. Does that sound right?
That's a big part of it. It's not the whole thing, of course. I mean, religion also relies on a lot of fallacious thinking. Like every logical fallacy has been used as an argument for God, and coincidentally, every argument for God is also a logical fallacy. But primarily, it has been cultural. There's an old Jesuit saying that you give me a child until he is 7, and I will show you the man. And that was the biggest advantage that I had, because my family had this weird tradition. They were a Mormon group, and they had this weird Mormon tradition that you don't indoctrinate the child until they reach the age of reason, which they determined arbitrarily to be 8 years old. What I've seen is that when you are indoctrinated before that age, that child until he's 7, like the Jesuits were saying, you can actually lose your ability or have it severely debilitated that you will never be able to reason rationally for the rest of your life. Not on that subject. Things will become compartmentalized so that when we get to discuss religion, you will have automatic barriers go up in your mind. The walls go up, so to speak. I don't know what the psychological term for your defenses going up, because, warning, we're getting into this sacred area we can't talk about. And so people will lose the ability to think rationally on those terms. They can't be skeptical in that avenue. And I was saved that because my family, for whatever reason, didn't put me through that. So by the time they came in on my 8th birthday to tell me that that the Bible was the absolute truth and the infallible Word of God, my initial reaction was, no, it isn't. Look what it says here. I was able to resist that. I already had dinosaur books, from 2nd grade that showed cladograms. I could already tell how everything was related. So there was no undoing that. I mean, all we ever had was more and more evidence that the original idea was correct and the religious idea is still wrong. That's my perspective.
Okay. Just in a similar vein there, do you think, I'm trying to think how to phrase this correctly. So a lot of parents will teach their children a religion or faith at a young age. Most atheists, just in my experience, just kind of don't care. It's basically agnostic atheists, and they just won't talk about religion. But there are some who basically preach it to their children, just like a Baptist might preach it to their children. Do you think that is going to have the same harmful impact?
I can't imagine a single example of that. I'm an official representative of American Atheists. I'm the former president of Atheist Alliance International. Atheist Alliance of America. I have been an atheist activist professionally for 5 years. I've been on the speakers circuit for a decade. I've never met I'm one of the most militant atheists I know of or can think of. Dawkins complains that I'm more militant than he is. I can't, and that's true. I can't think of a single person who preaches atheism to their kids in the way that you're talking about. If there was such a person, it would be me, and I don't, and I didn't.
Okay. So
Christopher Hitchens' brother is an evangelical. Were you aware of that?
I am, yeah. I saw an interesting debate between the two of them that came up into it.
Yeah, I didn't see that. I imagine that would be funny. You know, I saw Christopher Hitchens the first time I ever was in the same room with him. He did a debate here in Dallas. It was at Prestonwood Baptist Church, which has a 7,500 seat stadium sanctuary. Think about that. And he does this debate against Bill Dembski. And I remember talking to these people that were running this church. I'm like, you're going up against literally our best, hands down, no dispute. Christopher Hitchens is our best debater. And Bill Dembski is your guy? Seriously? You not want to rethink that? Well, I guess since Hitchens had already beaten William Lane Craig, what else did they have?
That actually brings us to an interesting question here. I'm going to rephrase this here, but so just first, have you heard of a character named Darth Dawkins?
Yes. I'm so sick of trolls. People who argue in bad faith. They don't care. They ask you all these questions so that they can then pretend that you haven't answered what you have in fact answered, but it wouldn't matter what you answered or if you didn't answer. If you eventually get tired of them and block them, they declare it a victory. The point, why does somebody like that exist? I mean, wouldn't literal masturbation, be better than what you're doing on the internet? It would certainly be a better use of your time.
Mm-hmm. So,
yes, I said Darth Dawkins would be better off if he just got out some Vaseline and left me the fuck alone. Yes, that's correct.
So, for the, I always get these messed up, but I think it's the sadists who are interested in having conversations with him, or people engaging in presuppositional apologetics. What would you suggest?
Whether it's the sadists or the presuppositionalists?
For the individuals who want to argue with people like Darth Dawkins, would you have any advice for them?
Yeah. I remember when I was a young man, I got this crazy idea. Remember, I told you I was very embarrassed at who I was when I was a young man. Okay, I just want to preface that because I was so much in a headbang and being the total thrasher and everything that I was determined to headbutt my way through a wall, which I did. But that's your alternative. I mean, if you want to debate you can either debate with Darth Dawkins or you can headbutt a wall. You can achieve this. Well, with the wall, you'll at least achieve a goal.
With the wall, at least you'll make an impact.
Exactly.
Okay, so our next question. Oh, sorry, I didn't give the credit. It's from the same person, Solveig. I hope I'm saying that right. So they ask, is it true that you were a Satanist back in the 80s when there wasn't really a common understanding of non-belief?
No, in fact, it might have been the reason that I wasn't a Satanist was because there wasn't a common understanding of non-belief. I mean, I was associated with a lot of Satanists. I ended up getting kicked out of a religious household when my own home situation was bad. So I ended up, somebody referred me to these religious people, and I ended up I was being accused of all kinds of things by these people that things I would have never thought about doing. I'm being accused of doing. And so I found the religious people being excessively judgmental and accusatory. Go figure, right? What a surprise. And then I ended up being taken in by a household of people that were declaring themselves to be Satanists. These people, I had no idea what Satanism was. I was so stupid back then that I thought that they believed there was a devil. And I knew so little about religion at all that I didn't bother to press them on it. Being impressed by this one girl that I dated that could use the Bible to argue against Christians, I thought that was a talent. I thought that was impressive. Now, yeah, that's not that impressive. I mean, I remember people would say back in the 80s, read your Bible, and now I agree completely. The atheist argument should be read your Bible, because statistically, the number one reason people give for why they've fallen away from Christianity when they were raised in the United States, let's say atheists in America, the number one reason they give for why they're atheist is they read the Bible. And Penn Jillette famously said, read the damn Bible, because we need more atheists, and nothing will get you faster than reading the damn Bible.
Okay, so a little bit of a change of pace here. User Templar asks, could you, in your own words, define truth and touch on what you mean when you say evident truth?
Okay. Truth is what the facts are, what we can show to be true. You can't claim something as truth just because you want to believe it. You have to be able to show the truth of it, which means you have to be able to show what is true about it. Now, there are things that can be true and therefore truth that we don't know, but we don't get to declare that. It's like declaring, like all religions do. They all pretend to know things no one even can know. You don't get to claim knowledge just because you believe something doesn't mean that it's knowledge. Just because you're very convinced doesn't mean, I know it for a fact. No, a fact is objectively verifiable, and knowledge is demonstrable with measurable accuracy. You can show what you know and demonstrate it through some sort of test. But if you can't verify the accuracy of your claims to any degree at all by any means whatsoever, then you factually cannot know what you merely believe. You're just claiming to know things that you don't. So evidence is a body of objectively verifiable facts, which is a tautology, because facts are objectively verifiable by definition, or say hypothetical example. The things are accepted to be true in a hypothetical scenario, or we can demonstrate that they're true because they are objectively verifiable. So evidence is a body of facts which are positively indicative of or exclusively concordant with one available position or hypothesis over any other. So you can't say, we're both looking at the same evidence. No, it's not evidence. If the same fact, if the same fact would be true in both scenarios and two mutually exclusive conditions, if the same fact would be true in both of them, then that's just a fact. By definition, the fact does not become evidence until it indicates one or eliminates the other.
Was that your Kent Hovind impression?
No.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought it was.
My Kent Hovind impression is a little better than that, but I'm not going to do it right now.
Okay. So
it hurts to turn my mouth onto the side of my face so far.
So, unless I misunderstood what you said there, at the beginning, you said what you mean by truth is things that can be shown to be true. And so, when you say evident truth, you mean the same thing? Is that right?
Yeah. No, there's some definitional problem that the common definition of apparent is what I mean by evident, which throws people off. But I'm not just talking about something that looks like it's true. That we have facts to support that this is the conclusion. This is the only way that I can use. And I know that common dictionary like Merriam-Webster defines this incorrectly, but then they define animal incorrectly. You can't always trust a common dictionary. So some things they got right because you have to get some things right, or there would be no reason for the thing to exist. But that doesn't mean that they get everything right all the time. And there are some things, just like you can see with a number of different dictionaries that may have conflicting opinions. And if somebody's going to define something as usually having this, well, what does usually mean? If the thing has it or if it doesn't, if the word usually is in the definition, that doesn't tell us anything. It doesn't let us know if it's a criteria or not. And one of the examples I'm talking about is like dictionaries will define an animal as including including single-celled animals. No, by the biological definition, animal, any member of the taxonomic, phylum Metazoa, is multicellular. It's in the definition. You can't have a single-celled animal, or it's not an animal. A dictionary to understand biology.
Okay. So this next question is weird, but I think we'll go ahead with it. It prefaces with saying the heritability of religiosity, the low birth rates, and relative evolutionary unfitness of the atheist population, and high fertility rates of religious people make cultural dominance of religion all but inevitable. What would your argument against the statement that, what would your argument be against the statement that, quote, atheism, even if descriptively accurate, would still just be little more than a manifest resentment of the fact that Mother Nature does not care for truth, end quote?
Well, the first off is that while we are all born atheist in the sense that we are not born believing any religion, we are atheist until somebody lies to us, and then we adopt whatever faith was instilled upon us. What the question assumes incorrectly is that once you have been inculcated into a religion, then you stay in that religion. But that's not the case. Most of the atheists in the United States were not raised atheists. The vast majority of them are former Christians or former Muslims or so forth. And the most outspoken, best advocates of atheism and secularism are all former believers, myself included. So I wasn't even as in deep as like Seth Andrews or Matt Dillahunty and them were. But what we're seeing statistically now is that atheism is on the rise, not having anything to do with birth rates whatsoever. But atheism is on the rise in all 50 states faster than any other religious any other perspective with regard to religion. We are growing faster than Islam, and while Christianity is in a general state of decline everywhere. Now, Islam is still on the rise everywhere but the United States. And so there is a race as to which is going to become the dominant religious perspective, whether it's going to be atheism or whether it's going to be Islam, and those are close. And it has, as I said, nothing to do with birth rates. And what we're seeing statistically now is that people are not going back to religion, because once we realize what the vacuity is, what the absolute lack of truth, the fact that we're taught all these things by religion that we then learn are not true at all, how do you go back to that? And I know that some people have. Some people some decide they want to believe something. You know, I've talked to 3 or 4 atheists that have decided that they're going to go back to religious belief. Why? No reason given. I mean, one, honestly, her answer was that she became a Christian again because the guys that were running the table at her college for the Campus Crusade for Christ were hot. That's why. Seriously? So, I'm not even kidding. We had an atheist activist who was speaking at events who then got into some trouble with the atheist community by declaring a degree that she didn't actually or hadn't actually earned. So she's claiming some college degree that she never actually earned. And so she got a little bit of a hell for that, and then decided that it was too much trouble. She could just go back to her congregation in her little small town, Florida, whatever it was, and, you know, go back to the sing-song Sundays that she had before, and then she won't have any more troubles anymore. And that sadly is what a lot of people do. But for me, it's just all about our primary motivation. For me, I want to improve understanding, and that means that the information has to be accurate. And it's not just that I want to believe something, because if you show me that I don't want to believe, but we can show that it's true, then I'm going to kind of be forced to accept that, what I believed before is wrong, and now I have to change it. And you never make so much progress as when that happens.
Okay. So our next one, I'm just going to ask first because I don't know what this is. Do you know what the term acceptation means?
No.
Okay, we will skip that because I don't either.
Yeah, maybe if I saw it spelled, but I'll just leave it.
Okay, we'll just move on. So Reject Tradition asks, what sort of proof would it take for you to start to believe in a god or a religion?
Well, not all religions require a god. But if any religion wants to convince me, they're going to have to show me that their mythology is correct, and then basis on that is that every religion is based on the supernatural soul, right? So we have to show evidence of that. The physicist Sean Carroll has just come out recently saying that we know for certain that there's no such thing as a soul. So even if we wanted to be ambiguous and say that we can't prove there's no God, there's no soul. So why are we arguing this point? So a religion would have to prove to me that there is a supernatural, and that would mean that not just that prayers work, on better than a 50% rate, which they don't, by the way. Prayers don't work on it. The success rate on prayers is actually less than on random chance. If there was a supernatural, then people like Gandalf and Obi-Wan and Hermione would be out there demonstrating this ability. And even if science couldn't explain it, we would be able to verify they're doing it, that they're actually doing it. And as James Randi, who I'm proud to say was a friend of mine, he did this $1 million challenge for like 20 years for anybody that could demonstrate under controlled laboratory conditions, demonstrate any aspect of the supernatural, anything at all. And while many people showed up for an initial trial, nobody could get to the actual trial. They couldn't get past the preliminaries ever. Anybody. So anybody that said that they could do precognition, astral projection, manipulating auras, whatever, telepathy, name it. Nobody could pass the most basic of all tests. So there is no supernatural. There's no evidence for it. Hitchens razor, I can declare there is none.
So there are studies that I've seen before that show that there is related just to what you were talking about there, that there is a statistically meaningful difference in people who undergo surgeries versus people who undergo surgeries and pray, which suggests that surgery combined with prayer is a bit more likely to succeed. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I've seen the exact opposite. That prayer, in recent studies from like only a year or so ago that I saw this, it was within the last year that I saw this published, that people who prayed before the surgery actually had a lower success rate.
Huh.
Yeah, I'll have to look it up, but I can get you that, I'm sure, or somebody already Googling it right now can probably get it to you before I can. But yeah, I can get it to you by tomorrow. But yeah, I've seen exactly the opposite research.
All right, yeah, I'd be interested in seeing that. Now,
it was with a control group, so there were people who went into surgery having been told that people are going to pray for them, and there were people that had people that were praying for them, but that weren't told that. Things like that. I remember that because I can't remember all the specifics. It'd take me a while to look it up. But if anybody if anybody's trying to Google it now, those would be some of the other details that might help them find it before I can.
Okay. So let's see. Our next question comes from Rickett Ralph. They ask, is it more likely that the evolutionary tree of life converges upon a universal ancestor, or is it more likely to find that more than one ancestor at the end of the tree?
More than one.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay. It's more than one. But the person asking the question may have something else in mind than what I do. Evolution is summarily defined as descent with inherent genetic modification. So that means an ancestor-descendant relationship. Horizontal gene transfer is when a far distant cousin crashes into you and you share genetic material horizontally. So you're now being descended from a sideways arrangement rather than an ancestor. So this cannot be part of evolution. Similarly, endosymbiosis, where a eukaryotic cell absorbs cyanobacteria, and that cyanobacteria then becomes chloroplasts for plants, or a eukaryote organism, eukaryote soul absorbs rickettsia bacteria, and those rickettsia bacteria, now enslaved to produce energy for the parent cell, reproduce along with the cell, and those rickettsia bacteria then become mitochondria. And they don't have to change. That's literally, they're the same thing. They're still bacteria. They never change. The mitochondria is still a rickettsia bacteria. The plant's chloroplast is still cyanobacteria. But obviously, if you have organisms connect to each other and fuse into one, that too is also not a evolutionary ancestry. Make sense? Because it's not ancestor descendant.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you're in the microbial area, you have a whole lot of horizontal gene transfer going on. But when you get into the multicellular organisms, that's significantly reduced for obvious reasons, because we are multicellular organisms. So we do have 8% of our genome is endogenous retroviruses and so forth, but you don't have a whole lot of horizontal gene transfer in a multicellular organism, but you do get that in a lot of microbes. So the tree of life emerged not from a single trunk, but from a web or a network of other organisms. So there were forms of life or quasi-life, things that would meet like all but one of the criteria for life, because there's like 7 basic criteria for a living organism, and you can have replicative systems that don't have all of these criteria, or maybe they do, and we could have multiple different forms of life all living at the same time. They're all microbes, and eventually, population mechanics, certain lineages are going to fade out or be consumed by others until eventually you only have one. And that eukaryote or the type of biota that we have, being both bacteria and eukaryotes, proliferate planet-wide. I hope that made sense.
I'm not gonna lie, it's not my area. I was a little bit confused, but I think I'd be confused if you explained it well. So that's we just move on to the next question. So this one comes from Solveig again. Solveig writes, "Hey Aron, I saw your debate with Muhammad Hijab. Am I saying that right?
Hijab.
Debate in London.
Yeah, the guy I ran into in Speaker's Corner. Yeah, Muhammad Hijab promised on video that he would come onto my show, because I'm doing a series of episodes where I talk about the Quran. So I read a few surahs, however long it takes to do an individual post on these number of surahs, and then I have a video hangout, and I invite all of these Muslims, and they habitually refuse to turn up to discuss what I've just read. Tell me what I've got right or wrong. If I'm interpreting this wrong, because I'm comparing, I'm not reading the hadiths. I'm just comparing. I'm reading the Quran in 3 or 4 different translations, and I do have some tafsirs so that I'll refer to. So because you can't the Quran is significantly smaller than the Bible, but you can't just read the Quran by itself. You'll have no idea what it's saying. You have to read all this peripheral stuff with it. And so I realized that if I'm raised in the United States, I'm not going, from a Christian background, I'm not going to have any idea what any of the traditional beliefs are, because there's a whole lot that the Quran doesn't get into. It just assumes that because it assumes everybody was raised as an Arab. So I have all of these Muslims helping me with the people who understand Arabic and everything, go over these translations to make sure that I got this right. And so far, to a large degree, I've got it right. But I invited Muhammad Hijab to do this thing with me, and he said he would, and then he refused to answer any messages. So I went through the Islamic Education and Research Academy, which is a kind of a joke, full of Islamic apologists. But anyway, I contacted them and I said, look, Muhammad Hijab has refused every means of contact, and so I want you to find me something else. I want you to find me someone else to come on my show. I said, I watched him. Muhammad Hijab got a debate in Hyde Park at that Speaker's Corner shortly after I'd met him. He got into it with somebody else, and they got into a fist fight over it. I'm like, if this is the way he comports himself, then I don't even need him on this stuff, because I need somebody who's going to be intellectual like he was representing himself to be. So get me somebody else. And I got promises that the IERA was going to find me another believing Muslim to come on my podcast with me. So far, nobody.
Oh. Well, if you want some help with that, I think we actually have some people in the community that might be able to fit for that. I can send them your way. So let's see. Next,
that would be appreciated. I've got one guy that is on every episode with me, and I'm delighted that he's always there. But I really do need more input, and I have an awful lot of input from people who no longer believe in Islam. I'm going to trust that they're going to be able to represent what they used to believe adequately. But I'd still prefer, honestly, to talk to somebody who still believes it, because I think their perspective is going to be different.
Yeah. I'll talk to some people. I know there's some people in the community that are Muslims and like to debate with atheists and Christians. So we can definitely round out some people and send some names to you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. So just for anyone chatting, because I know people come in and out. If you
I'm sorry. If anybody's interested in that series, it's Quranic Lessons for the Infidel. Is the blog post series, and then whenever I do the video hangout, I include or link the video at the bottom of the blog post for each one, and I'm about almost halfway through the Quran by now. I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No worries. So just want to say for everyone here, because I know some people have come in, gone out. If any of you guys want to invite your friends to this AMA, we've got a little bit of time left. The link is discord.gg/bluepolitics. And by the way, we still got time for more questions as long as you have time, Aron. But I also want to say, thanks for coming out and doing this. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm actually enjoying it. I was expecting the more traditional, sit on video format and everything, but I like the way you're conducting it, so we're all good.
Oh, that's good. So let's see. Armin asks, what are the naturalistic alternative models of evolution by natural selection you are aware of, and your opinions on them?
There are alternative models?
I am not aware of any.
Or am I? Natural selection is one mechanism. Sexual selection is another Darwinian mechanism, meaning that Darwin came up with it. And I think there was a third one that Darwin came up with, but it escapes me at the moment. And then we have genetic drift, which is actually a big one. It's actually the most common. And I tried to explain this when I was in Speaker's Corner, and I was arguing with the IERA there, and they were telling me that what the number one thing was, and I was trying to explain that genetic drift really is the big one. I mean, in order for natural selection to have something to select against, you have to have some variation already present. Where does that variation come from? The variation comes from genetic drift, which may or may not then have natural selection applied to it, because you can have most of the biodiversity that we have in this planet didn't have natural selection applied to it. It's just variation that naturally accrues. Into that anymore if you don't need to.
Okay. So Meme Gang asks, what is the name of your podcast and where can we find it?
I should have it on regular podcast channels, but I do not. I've only been putting it up on YouTube. I had it on Spreaker and some other thing. I forget what they were called, but I mean, they wanted me to pay money, and I just couldn't be bothered, so I didn't. I call mine the Raw Man Podcast.
So in our announcement channels, if you scroll up just a little ways, guys, we do have links to some of Aron's YouTube videos. If you follow that to his channel, it's pretty easy to find the newer content. So let's see. Checkacout asks, what do you think makes Christianity the dominant religion to prevail over paganist religions over the progression of time?
What was his name? I forget the inventor of the printer press. But that's what it was. Yep, Gutenberg.
I think it's Johannes Gutenberg.
Yes, that's it. That's it exactly. Yes. So it was the printing press.
Okay. Let's see. Alien Robot Ghost asks, do you consider circumcision to be mutilation?
Yes.
Would you like to expound on that?
You're taking a minor child who again cannot offer, can't give consent. And there was a news story about this a couple weeks back about a child who I think he was 5. Why would you take a 5-year-old and have them circumcised? And the child is on the news. I know this is emotional clickbait, but the child is crying at wanting his foreskin to be glued back on. So you've taken something away from this child that maybe you don't think it's necessary, but the purpose of it is twofold, and both of the reasons are bad. Well, actually threefold, and all 3 reasons are bad. One, because it's the most sensitive region, and you can't give these young children anesthetic. So why the fuck are you doing this anyway? The only reason to do this, apart from causing intense pain to a child who will fortunately not remember it if you do it young enough, is to desensitize the sexual act. Why? It is a lie that we have to worry about all these infections. I've given an interview with people, activists in the Netherlands, who are running an organization that are trying to advocate against male genital mutilation. I mean, what happens to females is actually much worse. I don't think there's going to be the argument for that. What happened to female genital mutilation is much worse and more insidious than what happens with male genital mutilation. But that doesn't justify it, does it? You're still desensitizing a child's most sensitive organ against their will when they're a child without anesthetic for the reason of diminishing their happiness. What did we say about that? What was the definition of morality? You're trying to diminish that child's happiness. Why? Because religion is your only reason? Sorry, but if you, as I already said, if you gave religion as your only reason, you still haven't given a reason. And, well, it'll minimize the risk of diseases. Fuck no, it won't. Foreskin will help that child. There is no reason to have this practice at all, period. Which is why religion invented it. It was a way to get people to succumb. We know that you're committed to this religion. If you'll take a Bronze Age blade and chop the foreskin, the only expendable piece of material on your body, apart from maybe your earlobes, chop the most sensitive piece of material off of your body in honor of this religion, well, then we can trust you. That's why they do it. Justification whatsoever.
All right. So, I'm not going to argue. I try not to argue in any of these, but I just want to ask.
That's got to be hard. Can I ask you about that? How do you deal with that if you're just doing an interview and you're doing a very good job? Very good job. I have no idea, honestly, what your position is, or if you agree with anything said, which is admirable for somebody that's giving an interview. I don't think I have that ability. I would have to put in a word edgewise in there somewhere.
It can be hard, but I'd rather not piss you off, so I can shut up.
No worries.
So I have seen when these kinds of debates have come up, reliably one source that's going to be cited by the people who do say there are medical benefits is the American Pediatrics Association. And not to be confused, because now oftentimes with these debates, sometimes there's an official sounding name, and it's just like, oh, this is like a group of like 100 Christian doctors that have a broad sounding name. But in this case, the Pediatrics Association, I think it's the APA, American Pediatrics Association. It's an association of all pediatricians, and in a study, they don't recommend circumcision, but they do note plenty of medical benefits. Do you just have any thoughts on that?
In talking with medical professionals, as I said in these previous interviews, I'm talking to a representative of this organization who has degrees herself, and I'm like, okay, so what are these medical benefits that either you personally or you as an organization would have to be aware of by now, since this is what you focus on? And so, of course, they know what all of these benefits are and what the percentages really are. And they are statistically so low that there's no reason to do this. And the religious argument, of course, is even worse. When we argue, and this was a beautiful thing that I read, how there's supposed to be a handful of gospels attributed to Jesus that never got into the Bible. One of them, I don't know if you were aware of that, but there are a handful of gospels supposedly written to or by Jesus that didn't get into the Bible. And one of them is the Coptic Gospels, the Gospel of Thomas. And in that one, they ask Jesus what he thinks about superstition, what he thinks about circumcision, and Jesus's answer. This is the only time I've ever heard an intelligent answer from Jesus. He said, "If God meant for people to be circumcised, we'd be born without foreskins." Fucking brilliant.
That's a pretty interesting point. So. All right, so our next question comes from Jürgen Klopp. He asks, is abortion moral?
As I mentioned, the only types of killing that the Bible does not endorse is the type of killing which has what was the word? Humanity, morality, mercy. It has mercy in it. So we've seen cases where there are extreme cases, like the girl who gets raped by her father, her AIDS-infected father, and pregnant, and so that the child is going to be non-viable. We've seen a case where they tell the woman that this baby will die within minutes of birth. The only reason it is alive is because it's using her body to sustain itself, but once it comes out of her body, it won't be able to survive. So rather than make a 13-year-old girl go through a complete advanced pregnancy, when you know that you could, which is also dangerous, by the way, that going through a pregnancy, going through a birth is still dangerous. Now think about it. If you could do this in the 4th month of the pregnancy, you could spare her all of that body damage. You could spare her all of that risk. You could spare her all of that pain. You're not sparing the child anything, right? I mean, if you do it in the 4th month, then the child is spared itself from just being able to suffer. That's all it's going to do. It's going to suffer. It's going to come out and it's going to be dead. And it's going to have to die because it can't sustain itself. Everybody knows this. The moral thing to do would be to do the abortion at earliest opportunity in the 4th month. But people who claim to be moral forced that girl to go through an entire pregnancy, forced that girl to give birth to a baby just to destroy her body and then watch the baby die, when everybody knew that was going to happen and everybody knew better. And they all knew what the right answer was, and religion refuses to admit what the right answer is.
Okay. So the next question, coming from the same user, they preface it stating, it is more noticeable that when it comes to politics at college, the professors are more dominantly liberal and will tend to teach based on their own opinions rather than teach from independent perspective. Is this a problem?
Yes, teaching from opinion is a problem. I don't know about the being liberal thing, because that's correlated with having education. The more educated you are, the more likely you are to be in certain demographics, whereas other demographics favor those who are not educated and are typically blue collar and so forth. But allowing a personal opinion to override facts is a definite problem. When I took these classes that I mentioned before, like comparative history of origin of world religions and so forth, I had an exemplary instructor. My teacher was a PhD professor he was a Methodist and he was like a minister at the same time. But being Methodist, that's he's not an extremist of any kind. He's been personally to all of the religious temples around the world, like many different types of religions, just in India, to say nothing of Cambodia and so forth. So he's like personally experienced all of these. He's very objective. His lessons were brilliant. Sadly, I was in a classroom full of Christians who all glazed their eyes over at almost everything he said, and I was the only student that got an A. He based much of his class material on Bart Ehrman, and I loved that class. My son, when he went to college, went to go take the same class, but they didn't have the same professor anymore. They had replaced him with a Southern Baptist who taught all kinds of ridiculous nonsense, like that atheism is a religion that believes, X and Y, which of course my son is not only an atheist himself, but he's my son. He knows better that everything that this guy is telling him is wrong, and that guy would not accept that it's wrong. Doesn't matter who it comes from. Even if it came from me and any number of atheist authors, he's still going to maintain his wrong position because he wants to impart that wrong position. He knows that it's wrong, but it's important that students believe that he's right, as we mentioned before.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're going to another question here. Fawn asks, should churches and religious organizations be taxed?
Yes. The reason that they are not taxed is because the agreement was, and the Johnson Amendment had a lot to do with this, though not everything. The agreement was that they wouldn't be used as lobbying institutions, but that's what every church in this country is being used for. That's why we have such a rise of Christian dominionism and Reconstructionism and Christian nationalism. The reason that I became an activist myself was because a handful of these religious extremists told me that they had voted on all of these specific judges and school board members and senators and so forth because they had all of their ministers across the state get into a network talking with each other about who's going to advocate what policies, and then they will go to tell their congregations, tell everybody in the congregation, vote for this guy, and then we will have our people in all of these positions, and we will take over the country that way. That was the plan. So that's the reason they weren't being taxed, is so they weren't doing that. But they are doing that, and so they should be taxed through the ass. As a matter of fact, they should be criminalized, because I think that lying to people in exchange for money qualifies as fraud.
So what about churches that don't do that, ones that are unaffiliated and
I'm a church that doesn't lie to people.
Well, I'm not talking about lying. A church that is unaffiliated with any other denomination, it's just an independent church, and they don't go into politics at all. Should they be taxed?
Well, how do you know that we're not going into politics? It would be nice to set up, well, these people didn't, but all these others did. We set up this rule expecting that they were all going to behave nice. And then if 98% of them are abusing that, well, I'm sorry, you've just lost the privilege for the whole 100%.
Well, I think I would say I think you mentioned this, is it Hitchens razor? Like, in absence of evidence that a specific church is corrupt, you can just dismiss it, right?
No, it was that what is asserted without evidence may be dismissed without evidence. If we allow that churches will not be taxed on the agreement that churches are not used as lobbying institutions, and then we find that the majority of churches actually are being used as lobbying institutions, that loses that privilege for all of them, not just the ones that we can find to be guilty. But that's if I was in control. It'd be great if that were the case, because it'd be fixing an awful lot of stuff that I'm afraid nobody's ever going to fix. And I actually I actually sincerely fear, not necessarily for the extinction of humanity, but we are on the verge of very bad things. I think people as a species are going to survive this. And it's going to be, we were going to be so mortifully ashamed of the state of ignorance that we're in right now.
So, do you have any concerns about the abrogation of individual rights based on the collective, malfeasance or misperforming?
Paraphrase that question.
So with what you were saying there, if a individual church isn't doing anything wrong, but most of them are, all of the churches will lose the benefit of basically tax-free status. What I'm saying
You have some people that are completely responsible drinking at 16 years old. You have some people that are completely responsible, but then you only have the 75% that are abusing that. So why do you make the same law applicable to all age groups, even though some are more mature than others? You know, you can't legislate that way. The law has to apply to everybody.
Right. So what I'm asking here is, do you have any, I guess, concerns or reservations about taking away individual rights when an individual has done nothing wrong?
When is that being advocated?
So I thought that was being advocated in what you were saying there, because like you were saying, if the group is, roughly speaking, I'm paraphrasing here, if the group is misbehaving, the rights for all of them will be taken away in that regard.
We're not talking about one church costing every church the rights. We're talking about we're not even talking about a 2/3 majority here, or 1/5 majority at the barest minimum, because we haven't established that there are any churches that are not being used as lobbies. I'm sure they exist. They statistically would have to. But the way that they are being used overtly and shamelessly is enough to cost the privilege for all of them. The biggest, most powerful, loudest are the most shameless. And you would think that people are going to have this awareness. Hey, we're going to be taxed if we let Robert Jeffress go on and continue doing what he's doing. We should put reins on Robert Jeffress. Are you going to put reins on Robert Jeffress? No, the federal government is going to have to do that with legislation. Sorry, you've just all lost your privileges. You better not cough up another Robert Jeffress, or you're going to be in a worse situation.
All right, so I think I may have not been describing this well, so I'll give it one last attempt. If I can't do this well, we can just move on to another question. What I'm seeing here is it seems like you're comfortable denying the rights of individuals in a certain regard if the majority is not using them correctly. Does that sound fair?
No, it doesn't sound like we're even talking about the same subject. When did we change the subject to something we haven't yet addressed?
So the way I'm seeing this is like, basically the majority of these churches aren't doing the right thing. And
right,
so
and there's
individual churches.
It's not like you have, it's not like you have lesser churches that are complaining, hey, this church is doing something wrong and they should stop. We're not seeing that. We're not seeing anybody say, hey, we don't want to lose our tax-free privilege, so hey, would you please shut up? Robert Hagee, can you stop doing what you're doing? Ken Ham, Jefferson, anybody, name them. I mean, we got hundreds of them. So we have system-wide entire corruption where statistically we understand that there should be some churches that are not lobbying like this, but we haven't gotten evidence of that. We only have a statistical probability because we're not hearing from any of these churches speaking up saying, hey, I won't do this because I understand the law and I respect the Constitution. We're not getting that. That's not happening. We have nothing but evident corruption and no abstention. That's it. Where is anybody being denied their right?
Oh, I wasn't saying that it's currently ongoing. I thought you were advocating that.
I don't know how you got that impression.
Okay, so the impression I got was that you were saying since the majority aren't, we're talking about tax-free status, since the majority are abusing it, all should lose.
I could change it if you want. I mean, nobody is saying, hey, our church doesn't do that. We don't have a church out there saying our church isn't doing that. It's these other guys that are it's that 99% that is making us look bad. Nobody's saying that. They're quiet. That are obstructing this, that are doing this anyway, and blazingly admitting that they're doing it and bragging that they're doing it. and for the reasons that they're giving. This is why they should be taxed. And as I said, it should be worse than that, actually, because if you are lying to people in exchange for money, that is the definition of fraud. They should be criminalized.
Okay. All right, so we'll move on here. Sorry, I don't feel like I was phrasing those questions right. But so next question we do have phrase
the rest of the interview brilliantly, so it's okay.
Thanks. So the next question we have from the average crusader is the problem of shootings the person or the ability to access the guns?
We know with one of the worst school shootings that the guns that he used were not his. That he took them from legal owners, his family. He killed his own family to get their guns. And what that means is that there's not a clear answer. And like I said, I don't have a fascination with guns. I certainly don't have the fascination with guns of several people that I know. I can't imagine going through my everyday life feeling the need to carry a gun on me all the damn time. I feel like if I live in that much fear, why live at all? I mean, damn. I can't imagine being that afraid. Like that. What the hell's his name? The crazy guy in Austin who says he's got to have 50 guns because he can't be safe and don't have 50 guns on him. What is Alex Jones? Got to have 50 guns, really? What are you going to try to protect your family? It's a ridiculous bullshit excuse. I can't imagine what it would be like to live in that much fear. Where you have everything deadbolted and you have trained guard dogs. I know people that bad they trained guard dogs. You've ruined a perfectly good dog by training it to be an attack killer. So that if anybody is at your house and they stand up too quickly, the dog charges. Because I've been in houses like that. If you stand up too quickly to go to the kitchen, you get another Coke or whatever, the dog goes after you. Seriously. We used to be give me liberty or give me death. That's where we started. And now we've sacrificed all of our freedoms out of fear. That's pathetic. That's the question. The question is too complex. I don't know what the solution is. I don't want to criminalize guns. I see bad sides of that. At the same time, I think we're going overboard the other way because here, I live in Texas. I don't know where you are, but even here in Texas, I was at the state Senate, watching the legislators when they dropped the fine or the fee for open carry to $40 because they said this in their arguments. They wanted everybody to have a gun. Everybody. They want everybody in Texas to have a gun. Because then they'll feel safe. I don't get that. I can't imagine needing that to feel safe. I also see it as a distraction. Because when we think that the gun makes us safe, then we're completely taking our attention away from the freedoms they're taking away from us so we don't even notice. Because we think we're safe because we have a gun. There is so much going on that people aren't even paying attention to because, I got my gun, I'm safe. Yeah, bring your gun to a drone war. And it's not even about that. It's not even about military might. It's a nice distraction for people to look at and say, I have my gun, so I'm safe, and so I'm going to be complacent, and I'm going to allow all of these other things to happen to railroad all my rights away. So we are giving away our freedoms out of fear.
All right. So I am pretty sure I know your answer to this next question, but we can ask it anyways. Skylar asks, what do you think about gay conversion therapy?
Abhorrent. Again, religion has just always got the wrongest answer imaginable. It's not just that it's always wrong, it's always the wrongest it can be. What is the problem with somebody being gay? I prefer to treat absolutely everybody as if they're bisexual. Why not? supposedly to be bisexual, right? I feel it's like a strange exception because I'm when I was a young man, I remember thinking, or I remember seeing this documentary that said that, you know, like by the year 2000, everybody will be bisexual, and I remember saying, no, that ain't gonna fucking happen. And you know, we got well past that, and I realized the prediction was pretty well correct because most people are on that bell curve that I was talking about. It's not like you're gay or you're straight, and then they come up with a third category for bi. It's like most people are in that bell curve. And I'm in that weird extension where I'm way up I'm all the way in the heterosexual region. There's not any dick I want to smoke. Just being honest. That was normal in 1982. That's actually kind of strange now. And I actually feel a little bit left out. Everybody else is having these open explorations of bisexuality or whatever. No, thank you. I don't care. It makes me feel old-fashioned somehow. Care. And look at the market for it, right? Girl-on-girl porn, right? It's got to be the top-selling porn. That has the word family in it is probably evil. And yet here's another one who is caught having sex with a man. He's an anti-gay lobbyist caught having sex with a man. And then there was another one who was caught having sex with a man in his van outside of his church. And another one that the leaders of the national organization of the gay hating people, I can't remember what their organization was called, but he gets caught going in with a rent-a-boy from Brazil whose advertising qualifications was that he had an 8-inch uncut, uncircumcised penis. The criteria for traveling with this guy? And he hired him, he said, for massages. I'm sure you did. And the other one that in Colorado, who's wholly anti-gay, bragging about how great his sex was, yet he's cheating on his wife, snorting cocaine off of a male hooker's ass. What is with this hypocrisy? What is it with Abrahamic religions that they are so homophobic and so strange about it? Well, they will kill gays. And you go to Sharia countries, and I've been to a couple of Sharia countries. You go to Sharia countries, and they will murder homosexuals. But at the same time, you have people who are gay who say that, you know, women are for procreation and men are for pleasure, but they don't realize they're gay. How the fuck do you not realize that? And what is the issue with Abrahamic religion making everybody so hateful and retarded and backward about everything? If somebody wants to, if consenting adults want to go play some game, name it. I don't care what the game is, and it doesn't hurt anybody else. Why the fuck would I care? Hope that answer is adequate because I'm done.
Okay. So I don't want to abuse your time. Do you feel comfortable going on for a little bit longer?
Yeah, what the hell? Just, I am going to need another beer. Hold on. My fridge is right here.
So, what is your favorite beer?
I'm very disappointed when I go to Europe and I can't find good stuff. It's like very often the best stuff they have on tap is Guinness. Sorry, Guinness is only 4.5% ABV. And I want to invite people back to Dallas where we have 7 microbreweries in the immediate area that are all exquisite, especially Martin House, Revolver, and Tops, and Lagunitas. I had to name 4 breweries because I can't pick an immediate favorite. Well, I do have an immediate favorite. Tufts makes a brand called Full Grown Man. And it's embarrassing to walk up to a bar and say, yeah, I'm looking for a full-grown man. The best beers have the worst names. One of my favorites that I have in my fridge right now is Big Bad Baptist. And Big Bad Baptist is one that we have the reserve version, and it's a very high ABV, and it's bourbon barrel aged and exquisite. It's basically wine. And the one that I like is an imperial stout called Tupps Full Grown Man, or the Full Grown Beast. Full Grown Beast is, they do variants. So like they'll do like a Full Grown Jack, Full Grown Nick, Full Grown Ombre, Full Grown Scallywag, and they all have different mixes for different months. My favorite one is Full Grown Beast, which is 15.3% ABV. Pretty good for a beer.
Do you still produce your own beer?
I had somebody made me a couple of cases of my own beer and promised that he would do more. It was actually good. Honestly, it was only 7% ABV, but the flavor was good. He did a good job. And I could deal with only 7% ABV when it tastes that good, but he wouldn't do any more. And I don't think he realized this is not a one-off novelty, because there were people around the world that wanted me to ship that beer to them so that they could review it. 2 cases and stop. We can market this. You could make money on this. I don't know why he didn't. So if there are any brewers out there, if you can make me a good, syrupy, sweet, imperial stout that has, double-digit ABV, let's talk. I'll help you market it.
Okay, so while we're on this subject, I'd also like to ask, have you ever cut your wine?
I don't drink wine.
Oh.
Yeah, for whatever reason, it's like some people are. Maybe class is genetic. I don't know. It seems like only the upper class people drink wine. I cannot drink wine. I came from the trailer park where you only drink beer. So, yeah, that's it.
So our next question comes from Chame. He asks, "Do you think the universe came into existence from non-existence?"
No.
So does that mean that you believe the universe has always existed?
In a sense, yes. Though the answer is complicated. But first of all, I don't like Big Bang cosmology. I want everybody to know that up front. And the reason that I don't like it is twofold. One, I don't understand it. The second reason I don't like it is because no one else understands it either. If we accept that through cosmic redshift and the microwave background radiation, that the universe is expanding, and that logically every reverse time the universe contracts, and it contracts to a single position where you have all matter, all time and space and everything is all compressed into a single area. How small that area is for mathematicians beyond my skill level. I have no idea how they come up with a singularity, or how they understand how things happen in like 1/25th of a microsecond from the Big Bang. But if we accept, and I'm not sure I want to do this, but if we accept that there was a bang at all, in the sense that we have a cosmic inflation, what we have is a fourth coordinate on a Cartesian coordinate system. This is the one labeled T for time. Now we have an asymptote that, as we go backward through time, that asymptote turns until it stretches out time, because time has an effect, or supermassive gravity has an effect on time. It slows time down. So if you take all of the gravity in the universe and compress it into one area, like you would with what you'd have to with the singularity, time would be excessively slow. If you press everything together, time will stop. And so the existence of our material energy would literally be eternal, because as you get back to the Big Bang, then that asymptote changes until 1 second equals infinity when t equals 0. From nothing. That means it came from the thing that it already was. But something changed the angle on that asymptote so that it began to lean one way or another. What was the catalyst for that? Does it matter? We know it wasn't the Bible God. That's never been the right answer. I'm confident it's never going to be the right answer. Every time we've ever had a supernatural explanation for anything, and we were not satisfied with that answer, we went and found what the real explanation was. Once upon a time, we thought that volcanoes were gods. We thought that comets were omens. We thought that epilepsy was demonic possession. We thought sickness was witchcraft, and so on. Every time we found out what the real answer was, the explanation was a revelation of whole new fields of study that were previously unimagined and vastly more complex than the superstitious excuses we originally made up. That is going to be the case if we ever find out what it was that started time, essentially, that started first to go from an eternal position on that asymptote to begin to be.
All right. So our next question comes from Waffle Boy Coney. Go ahead.
Hey, first wanted to say, big fan. Really happy you could make it. My question was, I was wondering if you could talk about your experience with the Texas Board of Education, because I've heard you mention that, but I don't really know the details.
Oh, so we covered this. I know you were at work, but Aaron, would you mind running through it again, briefly?
Yeah, I don't mind. I've testified against the Board of Education on a number of different topics. And while science is the most obvious one when they try to deny evolution, and they deny anthropogenic climate change because they are beholden to and literally owned by the fossil fuel industry, so they are prohibited from ever admitting human involvement in climate change. The issue, the worst issue that the Board of Education has is not that they refuse to accept science. What is worse, I think, is what they've done with social studies, also known as history in Texas. It is a literal whitewash. What we have with Christian nationalism is it's another word for white evangelical nationalism, white supremacy. And one of the things that they've been doing in the Board of Education, which has one black member, and I don't think they have any Hispanic members anymore. They were doing this thing where they have been eliminating from our history books any ethnic references for people that would be respectable, or any kind of role model. They try to get rid of Thurgood Marshall, for example. And at one point, they tried to replace Thomas Jefferson with Jefferson Davis, who used the Bible to advocate slavery.
Jesus.
They took a reference to hip-hop music. They didn't want hip-hop music to be referenced in our history books, so they changed it to country western. They want everything to be right-wing and white and Christian, so there was no mention. And I was in a room full of people testifying, where there were 50 people. Many of them were representatives of Native American tribes, of Hispanics, of Sikhs, all these different religions. And everybody's being ostracized. So they're all being eliminated by the history books. And one of our history books got sued for saying, from describing slaves as immigrant workers. And then they treat Moses like he was a historic character. And they explained the reason that they will do that is because they're determined to support the religious idea of American exceptionalism, that America is a successful country not because we across indefensible vast resources and exploited them at the cost of the inhabitants who were already there, not because we enslaved all these people to make us the richest country, not because we became the world's drug dealer by getting everybody on the planet hooked on tobacco, not for any of these insidious reasons, and not admitting anything the United States did wrong. They want to pretend that the United States was a shining beacon of what it means to be God-blessed. That was how it was expressed in one of the board meetings. So they will eliminate, they will censor, they want to make sure that nobody ever knows that the United States ever did anything wrong, or that the United States was ever anything but godly. And so they said that the founding fathers based their ideas on, and one of our history books literally says this, that it was based on that our Constitution was based on a covenant between God and Moses. There were a half a dozen, on this one day, there were a half a dozen expert PhD professors there to testify from different religious positions from different parts of the country to say that there is absolutely no truth to that. You can't teach people that because it's absolutely factually false and reverse of the truth. The Board of Education didn't give a fuck. It doesn't go to the agenda they want to teach people so that they can manipulate how they vote.
Damn.
Yeah.
I was just interested because I plan to be a teacher. I'm not in. I'm in Massachusetts, so we got the.
Well, you're lucky about that.
Yeah. I'm in the flip flop. We're the opposite. At least I hope we are.
If you want to appreciate your situation, come down here for a couple of months.
I've thought about it. I traveled cross country. You don't realize how it is other places. And not that it's all bad. It's just different.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
All right, so we got time for a few more questions before we get into them. I just want to remind everyone, this has been Aron Ra. Am I getting it right this time?
Got it right this time.
Okay. This has been Aron Ra. You can check our announcements for links to his YouTube channel. If you're a bit of a boomer and you don't know how to do that, you can just Google ARON.
It's a funny thing. I grew up not knowing that I was a boomer. I thought my mother was a boomer. It turns out that she was at the last of her generation and I was at the last of mine. I always thought in the 1970s, before they started calling it Generation X, they were calling it the me generation because they were all so selfish. So I thought I was part of the me generation. I only found out a couple of years ago that the year of my birth just barely fits into the boomer period, and my mother's generation just barely fits into I think it was the silent generation. I hear that okay boomer thing. I have to say, hey, not all of us, all right?
Well, I only recently found out that I'm a boomer. The internet has taught me that I'm over 24, so I must be a boomer.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, guys, this has been Aron Ra. If you can't navigate to our announcements channel, well, just go on Google ARON space RA, and his YouTube channel should come up pretty quickly there. And if you want to invite some of your friends here, it's discord.gg/bluepolitics. I'd like to also ask.
I can give you until 10 o'clock my time, which is another 25 minutes, but I'll have to bail after that, all right?
All right, sure. We'll go ahead with that. So I also want to ask, there are a few people within the Discord community that enjoy particularly debating this subject. There are some Christian apologists and some Islamic ones. If they were interested in a debate, would you be interested in having one here?
The problem that I have with doing formal debates is that I don't want to do any more online. It's an awful lot of effort, and I'm in such a financially strapped situation. I need to be paid for the effort because it takes a while to prepare. And I am completely down with debating Christians or Muslims. Now that I'm halfway through the Quran, I feel very confident in what I Muslims. They are very disadvantaged, I'm sorry to say, but I don't want to do it as an online format anymore. Not if I'm not going to get any. Not if I, if at least if it was a live audience where I'm in a room with somebody sharing a stage, then I know I'm going to walk out with an honorarium. At least something will be covered, and that doesn't happen with events like this, so I can't do them anymore.
Okay. So let's see. Next question we have here. Should there be, this comes from Whiskey Renegade, should there be mandatory federal education standards that all states must accept? And if so, should it be Common Core? Or maybe ask something, oh, sorry, I misread that. Or maybe something more or less strict.
I'll say, well, both much more strict and much less at the same time. I've been to Helsinki a number of times. I'm very envious that they have what is the highest rated form of education in the world. And if anybody is rated higher than we are, then we should be doing what they're doing. Or find out why theirs is better. And their school is very different than the way we do ours. A lot more free time for the students. They have a lot less homework. The structure is very different than what we're familiar with. And they have a different means of reading the results than we do, which is much less restrictive. The way that we test, how to run a Scantron and how to test, how to pass a multiple choice test in that capacity, but we're not teaching people how to be smart. And I don't want American education just to be better in that people pass tests better. I want us to be the smartest people on the planet. And the way that we educate in order to do that. We're going to have to prioritize education. We're going to have to pay our teachers more, but we're also going to have higher criteria on what it takes to be a teacher. We're going to have to vastly improve our standards on how we teach, which also will be a vast improvement for the students' experience, because the people who are doing the best education have students reporting that they couldn't go through an American school system. They would feel like they were in prison. So it's no wonder that American students feel like they're in prison. Go to fucking Helsinki. You get a much better education there. Well, why is that the case? If we want to be a proud American, we should be doing the best shit, right? Everything. And we can. We just need to pull our head out of our ass and realize that's the goal. We're American. We should be doing it the best. If other people are doing it better than us, then we should be fixing what we're doing wrong.
Okay, next question. Who is your favorite president?
Tough call. And I want to qualify this for everybody. I have to weigh positives and negatives. For everybody, I mean, like, quick answer, it would be a toss-up between Jimmy Carter and JFK, both of which had strategic or personal faults. When I wasn't entirely satisfied with Obama. I mean, when I measure the negatives versus the positives, he comes out as a net positive. There's more things I liked about him than that pissed me off. Necessarily the case with Bill Clinton, who was the previous Democratic president. Even though he was a Democratic president, I did not like the guy at all. Period. I thought he did all right on a couple of policies. That's it. I try to measure everybody positive and negative. I try to weigh the checks and balances, and sadly, it's difficult to come up with a clear answer. I want to say JFK. I know that he did shit wrong. I know that like a lot of people, and I don't need to get into all the negatives. I think my answer would be JFK. Now, if you want to ask me who's the absolute worst, it would be the one guy that I can't say anything positive about at all. Period. And I don't even need to name that one.
George Washington, I understand.
No, that
I think I know who you actually mean. I know who you mean.
I remember that Andrew Jackson, for many years, I thought Andrew Jackson was the worst president we ever had. He was the first evangelical Christian president we had. He was the one that was behind the Trail of Tears. He had so much horror that was heaped upon his name. And then we got George W. Bush George W. Bush Jr. And he was hands down the worst president we ever had. Was worse, but I didn't know about that yet. I know things about Nixon now that I didn't know when Nixon was president. And so he was worse technically than George W. Bush was. But the current guy, beats everybody hands down. It is my hope. It is my hope that we will never descend to the level that we are now.
What do you think is the worst problem with our current president?
There's nothing good to say about him. Literally nothing. He's an incompetent criminal. He's a crime boss. who doesn't even know how to be a proper crime boss. The only people in the world that he admires are dictatorial tyrants. He gets more joy out of demeaning people and taking away their rights than he gets seemingly from anything else. Victimizing people is his fun. He's good at it. He wants to be evil, but he's incompetent. And that's probably the best thing that I can say for him, is that we would be in a lot worse situation than we are if he was competent. By the way, for anybody wondering, I hated Hillary too. Just not as bad.
Kingsley. Sorry, I actually have to ask after this, and I'm just really curious. Have you, at any point in your life, switch your vote between parties, or have you always been?
I
one
have
party?
voted Republican, yes.
Okay. Would you mind divulging when or who for?
I think at some point I was convinced by libertarian friends. Whatever reason, in my blind stupidity, I trusted at that time to vote for Ron Paul. It was a time, as I said, I'm not very proud of how ignorant I was in my youth, and this wasn't all that long ago, so I'm especially ashamed of it.
Could you go more into that? Like, I think it just begs the question, like, why were you ashamed to vote for Ron Paul?
I was ashamed of my ignorance. I was not a very politically aware person. I went to the Iowa caucuses in 1988, and, for example, just to let you know how politically ignorant I was. They told me in order to attend this caucus that I had to register as, you know, and they said, "Are you a Republican or a Democrat?" And I said, "I don't know. How would I tell?" And the girl looked at me and said, "You're a Democrat." And I said, "How do you know?" And she sneered at me and said, "Trust me." The fuck, bitch? You judging me? What the fuck makes me Democrat? I've no idea. How do you look at somebody and decide with a sneer of hate and disdain that you are the enemy party? Which, by the way, I eventually figured out that I'm not actually Democrat. I'm just damn sure not Republican. That if I was born in 1962, and if I was an adult in 1962, I would have been a proud Republican then.
So I'm not trying to put you in a position or anything here, but wasn't that the Goldwater era?
Back in 1962, the Democratic Party was had been famously established by the KKK.
Oh.
They were the extreme religious right racists. Goldwater famously said that if the religious right ever take over control of the Republican Party, and they're damn sure trying to do that, it will destroy this party. Or words to that effect. I'm not remembering his quote exactly. But that's what Goldwater warned, was that the Republican Party would be destroyed when the religious right took it over. And he was right. Within a few years, the Southern strategy took effect so that the Republican Party and the Democratic Party effectively switched positions on a whole lot of things. And while there was a time when there was hardly any difference between Democrats and Republicans, it was difficult to tell the difference. They created this huge rift and have been going wide past it ever since. And the shitty thing about American politics and how ignorant Americans are of their own situation is that everybody wants to paint this as a left versus right issue. And as I said in the beginning of this interview, this was never about left versus right. Every president we've had in my life, and I'm 57, has been a right-wing authoritarian. All of them. Bill Clinton. Hillary is a right wing. Obama was a right wing authoritarian. Everyone. They always want to say, we have these right wing presidents. You want to have all these people on the left. We haven't had no people on the left. But what's worse than that is I wouldn't want anybody on the left on the authoritarian angle either. Bernie and Warren are in the opposite quadrant. They're in the anti-authoritarian left. And that's what the real issue is. Anti-authoritarian versus authoritarian. Look up the political compass if you don't understand. Did that answer the question? I hope so.
Yeah. So we did ask before. I don't think you actually answered, or maybe this wasn't asked. Anyways, do you have a
if I missed
preferred?
something, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, do you have a preferred candidate among the Democratic candidates so far?
Our political system is so jacked up that people who are not Democrat have to run as Democrat. I ran as a Democrat because I have no choice. It is physically impossible to win a seat in the Texas Senate if you're an independent. I had to run as a Democrat. So the best candidate right now is not actually technically a Democrat, which is fine. The Democrats have, for the most part, been a right-wing party, and a lot of people don't realize that they think the Democrats are left. They're not. Half the Democratic Party has been on the right, and all of our former Democratic presidents have been on the right. But the issue is, again, not about left or right. It's about anti-authoritarian or authoritarian, and my favorite candidate is Bernie. He's the one that has produced all the platform policies that every other Democratic candidate that has a chance is borrowing from. They're all using his platforms. He's the one that set them up. He was the crazy person 4 years ago nobody would take seriously because he had these ideas that everyone else is now borrowing. From 1981 sounded exactly no different than anything he says today, which is pretty impressive.
Chaim wants to know, do you support legalizing meth, heroin, fentanyl, and other opioids?
The way that other people have done this, it depends on how it's done. And as I understand it, when other countries have legalized opiates, they've treated it from a criminal issue to a medical issue, so that if you have a heroin addiction, you can get treatment for that, and you will not be treated like a criminal. You'll be treated like someone who's sick and needs help. And that's the way I lost one of my friends in the world. I lost to a heroin addiction, so I'm very sensitive to this. If I hadn't been addicted to smoking, I'm really glad that I was addicted to smoking for a long time, because I wouldn't understand what an addiction is. And I wouldn't have any sympathy or empathy for anybody else if I didn't experience that. If I didn't have the shame of not being able to just stop smoking anytime I wanted to and just walk away from it cold turkey for the rest of my life. That was a difficult thing for me to do, and it was a shameful thing. But I understand, because of that experience, how difficult it is for other people. I had to have that one addictive experience in order to have that empathy. I'm sorry to say I shouldn't have had to have that, but I did. So, yes, I advocate for the decriminalization of most, if not all, drugs. Okay. For different reasons in different cases. I mean, marijuana is like a singular instance where marijuana has a lot of singular instances behind it. It was established for an entirely racist reason. We know that. We've gotten admissions from the people that set it up, when it happened, why it happened. And it was to preferentially criminalize blacks and Hispanics. And that was the only reason we did it. No purpose at all. Just to ruin people's lives. That's the only reason they did that. And I don't smoke marijuana. I don't enjoy marijuana at all. I don't enjoy drugs in general. I mean, I do like my imperial stouts. That's about as far as I go. I don't like being high because I can't shut it off. You know, like hard drugs and stuff. I tried to smoke once when I was a kid with somebody that they gave me something laced with hallucinogenics, and I just like that messed me up for years. So no interest. They could legalize marijuana everywhere, and I wouldn't be imbibing. because I don't have any interest in it. So I'm not speaking from the point of I want to get stoned legally. That's not my issue. I'm looking at the fact that everybody that has legalized marijuana has not only raised their state revenues to such unprecedented levels that they have tax-free days. It's like that, but also if you want to win the war on drugs, give up. That's the way to win. How are you going to have a Mexican cartel that makes all of its money by importing illegal drugs into the United States if the United States is already producing its own drugs, vastly safer drugs, without any of the criminal conspiracy crap, and we have regulations on it, so we're getting revenue out of it, and everybody's free to have it? We win. So why the hell haven't we been doing this? Because obvious right answers are not what the current regime wants to recognize.
Okay. Acoustic Code asks, what do you think about the statement, quote, gaming is a waste of time, end quote?
I have no opinion on gaming. I don't have time for it myself.
Okay.
On anything. So, I mean, I don't know if I can even give an opinion about that.
All right. Whiskey Renegade wants to know if you like Joe Rogan.
I don't think so, but I can barely remember who that is.
Okay. Enchantress, so I'm going to rephrase your question here, Enchantress. Enchantress wants to know if the government should try, obviously not through violent means like that, but if the government should try to eradicate religion.
No. The most fundamental human right is to believe what makes sense to you, to have free thought. And there's another aspect to that, too. I mean, what if the reason that science never, ever uses the term absolute truth, the reason that everything we know to be a certain fact is still called a theory, is because we always want to make sure that we leave the gate open to that there could be something wrong somewhere and we could find and fix whatever that error is. We have to be open to the possibility, if there is one, that we could be wrong about something somewhere. We have to be able to have some level of improvement. That's why everything is a theory. That's the rule behind it. We can't advocate a dogma that everybody has to believe what we do. If we did that, then that would be considered heresy, and that would be just as evil as every time religion does it.
Okay. Patriot asks, do you think legalization of prostitution would be beneficial to combat illegal trafficking?
I don't know about that aspect. I know that other places, I've been to places where prostitution is legal. I've never paid, but you want to experiment with tourism in some places. I've been to the Netherlands, I've been to Australia, a handful of places where that was illegal. But what painted the picture for me was when an Australian pointed out, excuse me, I have dogs that are wrestling right under my microphone. And and one of them is a Great Pyrenees, and that the breed name is autistic. They don't get social cues. No, I'm sorry. I apologize for the tussling match that's going on under my microphone right now. Anyway, on prostitution, let's think about the hypocrisy first. I can pay any number of girls to come in and do any kind of horrible sex acts that I want to do, as long as I record it on video and I upload it or in some way market it. Then it becomes porn and it's completely legal. Then it's illegal and we're all going to jail. Does that make any sense? And we are talking about somebody using their body by their choice and assuming, of course, that they're legal adult to do that. Again, the government stepping in on their rights. It should be the simplest thing. Hey, I'll do you this favor if you can give me some money. Does it matter what the favor is as long as it's not hurting anybody? As long as we're talking about consenting adults, we're talking about giving consent, we're talking about things that aren't involving victimizing someone else. I'm voluntarily providing a service. I'm okay with doing this. If you're okay with paying me to do it, that's the moral answer. Why can't religion ever get that right? Why can't the conservative get that right? Why can't the social conservatives get that right? If they pay for so much prostitutes while lying about it, why are they advocating against it?
So our next question comes from Foxteria.
I'm not entirely done with that one.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I should have been. I just had an afterthought that, prostitution is not entirely illegal in the United States. I mean, there's some isolated pockets. I used to live in Las Vegas. So there are places in the United States where you can get legal prostitution. And there are anytime something becomes legal, it's also regulated. And one of the other problems that I have with our current administration is that they want to get rid of these horrible regulations. No, there's a reason regulations are there. It's to protect the people. And if you have legalized prostitution, you're going to have regulations on prostitution. That's going to be for everyone's benefit. That's going to be for the what do we call this? The professional involved, and that's going to be for their clientele. That's to everyone's benefit. So I advocate that. Now I'm done.
Okay. So this will be our last question from Foxteria. What's your prediction for the 2020s in terms? So this isn't 2020, but the next decade, basically, in terms of the political realm, and will it be significant to postmodern political culture?
If you'd asked me this weeks ago, I might have given a different answer. I think that because I have to stay on top of politics. I'm a professional political activist, so I have to follow everything very closely. And whereas it's funny that I used to be so incredibly ignorant about politics before, while it has the possibility to be even more disappointing than it was in 2016, last couple of weeks, seeing signs that it might not be. Seeing signs that maybe the Democratic Party will not shoot themselves in the foot and damn us all like they did before. I'm seeing possibility that maybe the media will not rig this election the way that they have the previous ones. And maybe the minority, slightly less than a third of the country, won't get their way this time. There should never be that way in an election, right? Where less than a third of the country gets the winning vote. But that's what happened last time. At least when you talk about the approval ratings that we're looking at right now. So there is I've seen some media that is letting go of Biden as being the default candidate. I'm seeing some media that is accepting that Bernie Sanders is not a joke, that it is actually going to be a progressive candidate. And I was seeing already some that were accepting that, hey, it might be Warren. Now they're thinking, well, maybe it's not going to be Warren. Maybe it'll be Bernie after all. Either way, I think Bernie's the better of the two, but it need not be Biden. We don't need any more of that. I don't need any more incremental change. We have urgent need for things that need to be addressed now. And Biden was promising that he's not going to do anything. That he would get the election, he would have the one term, so he can have on his headstone that he was a president, and that's the only accomplishment. That's it. No, there are things that need to be done urgently and quickly, and with great determination. So I'm expecting, hopefully, that maybe this time, and maybe I'm being too hopeful, but I'm expecting that maybe we're going to wake up and accept that this is what the majority of the population is actually leaning left for good reason. That everywhere we've seen the right take over, it's always been a detriment. It is a detriment in London. It's been in Bolivia and in Brazil and everywhere else we're seeing it, and it's horrible. And we need to fix it. The pendulum needs to swing the other way. And it not only, as I said, left or right, but it also needs to be anti-authoritarian, which if we just stress that enough, then everybody's fear of a left-leaning politics would be eliminated if they just realized what anti-authoritarian means. And that's it.
Okay. So that's all the questions we have, or really all the time we have. I almost did it. I didn't. Aron Ra, thank you so much for coming out. Really appreciate this. For everyone, I know there's some few people have been, trickling in as this has gone on. This has been Aron Ra. You can find his videos in our announcements and go to his YouTube page, or you can just Google ARON space RA, and you can find his YouTube page.
Appreciate it very much.
All right. Well, thank you, and I hope you have a happy New Year.
You too. Bye-bye.